your psychic powers and how to develop them. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Michael Packard. Your Psychic Powers and How to Develop Them. By Hereward, Carrington. Chapter 1. How to Develop. Every student of psychics, everyone who has experienced phenomena of one kind or another, or who is more or less mediumistic, desires to know how to develop his own powers and faculties so that the phenomena which come through him may be increased in power, in clearness, and in excellence. It is quite possible to ensure this, since we are all more or less mediumistic or psychic, and need only to cultivate our powers in order to develop them and bring them into maturity. Development may differ according to the character of the phenomena we desire. Those who desire physical phenomena must develop in one way. Those who desire to obtain automatic writing must develop in another. And those who wish to become clairvoyant must develop in still another, and so on. Spontaneous phenomena. To begin, let me give a few general hints to those who have experienced spontaneous phenomena in their waking state, or who have experienced remarkable dreams, which they feel signify something, but just what they do not understand. These spontaneous phenomena are often the simplest types of mediumship, though as a matter of fact, they are also an indication of psychic power, having but little to do with true mediumistic messages. That is, they are the result of remarkable powers within ourselves. All who obtain phenomena of this nature should make it a point, first of all, to maintain the physical health at the highest possible standard, so that the energies are not drained, and the body remains healthy and the mind clear in its judgment. It is essential to reduce the amount of stimulants which may be taken to the lowest possible quantity, or, if possible, omit them altogether. This applies not only to alcohol in all its forms, but also to tea and coffee. These stimulants excite the nerves and the imagination, and often induce manifestations which are not true psychic phenomena at all, but merely the results of a disordered nervous system. The subject should not eat too much meat. On the other hand, fruits of all kinds, particularly acid fruits such as the pear, peach, plum, orange, and lemon, are especially suitable, since the juices of these fruits act upon the liver and tend to cleanse the blood. Of course, these precautions are only for those who are serious in their study, and who are determined to obtain the best possible phenomena. The mind should be exercised in all healthy channels. Do not introspect or reflect too much on your own inner mental conditions. You must learn to live outside of your head, so to speak, in the outer world. Do not constantly wonder what is going on within your own brain. If you do, you will surely lead yourself into difficulties later on. In short, you should lead a healthy, active life, and between those times when you experience phenomena, you should think about them as applied to yourself as little as possible. Conditions for development. If you desire to obtain certain manifestations, it is not advisable to sit for them or try to obtain them for longer than 20 minutes to half an hour each day. At first, 5 or 10 minutes would suffice, and this time can gradually be lengthened as you progress. This is especially important, and the neglect of this rule is one of the great reasons for the dangers which mediums experience later on in their development. Suppose, for example, that someone appeared to you and gave you certain advice as to your course of action. It would certainly be unwise for you to follow this advice in every case without inquiring whether or not it would be just and sensible, and without using your own judgment when the advice was given. Even supposing that the person who appeared to you were really the spirit it claimed to be, there is always the possibility that this spirit may be mistaken, and the further possibility that some malicious and lying spirit is coming to you pretending to give advice, while in reality it was only leading you astray. There is this further possibility that the figure you saw was not really a spirit at all, but merely the product of your own subconscious imagination. Often this is the case, and yet the figure has given true and sound advice. All that we are saying now is that the judgment of the individual who receives such messages or advice must always be exercised upon the message received. If you do not cultivate this habit, you will find that messages often become more and more insistent when they are not followed, and will sometimes give untrue or lying information. They may even urge you to do certain things which are against your own welfare. All this can only be settled by the exercise of right judgment, and by the advice of those who know how much to believe in the messages. It is for this reason that the counsel and help of one who has had long training and experience in this subject is most desirable during these early stages of mediumship. The proper formation of the circle. The proper formation of the circle is of the utmost importance, and upon it depends the excellence of the phenomena and whether or not helpful personalities are drawn into your aura and environment. The best results may be obtained by closely obeying the following rules. From 6 to 10 persons usually constitute a circle. They should range on the average from 20 to 50 years of age. Of these, half should be gentlemen and half ladies. They should sit alternately around a table, or around the room in the case one of the party enters the cabinet. It is desirable to join hands in order to form a battery, so-called, and the feet should be kept flat on the floor. The circle should not last more than 2 hours, and not less than half an hour. An invocation or short, earnest prayer should begin the proceedings, followed by slow and quiet music, which may or may not be accompanied by singing, according to the expressed wish of the controls, or the experience of those forming the circle. The light should be subdued, but absolute darkness should not be permitted, unless strict instructions are given to that effect. Avoid dark seances, if possible, at all times. The value of flowers. It is advisable to have flowers in the seance room whenever possible, as their presence is said to attract spirits in a peculiar manner. The spirits say that these flowers are lights. Plenty of fresh air should be allowed to enter the seance room. If any member of the circle be ill, he or she should not be permitted to sit in the circle until well again. A developing circle should meet in the same room, since this room tends to become mediumized or soaked in the magnetic influences given off by the sitters. The chairs on which the members of the circle sit should be wood or cane-bottomed. The use of upholstered chairs is generally inadvisable. The table round which the members of the circle sit should be free from metal. The chair on which the medium sits must be cane or wood, and, as already said, free from all cushions or upholstery. Atmospheric conditions. Atmospheric changes play a great and important part in all mediumistic conditions. The drier the atmosphere, the better the phenomena as a rule. On damp, rainy days, little can be obtained. During a thunderstorm, startling phenomena occasionally take place. High, rarefied air is better than that of lower levels, and for that reason a house on the side or even the top of a high mountain should be selected, if possible, in which to hold seances. Failing this, select a house which has as high an altitude as possible. One member of the circle must, by universal consent, undertake to conduct the proceedings, to converse with the spirits when they appear, to arrange the sitters in their proper places, to adjust the amount of light required, etc. His word must be followed at once, and without question, otherwise the necessary harmony will be destroyed, and the circle will fail to obtain as good results. Excitement in all its forms should be avoided. If one in the circle develop mediumistic power, he should be placed next to a more fully developed medium, unless instructions are given not to do so. In this way, the power is concentrated and focused at one point. Misuse of spirit advice. Never attempt to use psychic power for worldly purposes. If you do, you will invite mischievous and lying intelligences to your circle, and the medium will possibly lose what mediumship he already possesses. Do not sit too frequently. Every other night at most, should sittings be held, or even twice a week. See that the room is not too cool, and is not unduly heated. As soon as the first manifestations have been received, encourage the spirits by talking to them in a natural tone or voice, as you would if they were visibly present in the room. Speak to them as you would if they had returned to earth in bodily form. Be natural, in fact. You will get the best results this way. Many of those who are interested in spiritualism are so situated that they cannot join circles but wish to develop alone. This is as a rule unwise, unless someone is present who understands the phenomena which are likely to develop and who can help and give good advice when required. You may do so if the following instructions are kept carefully in mind. If you can provide yourself with a cabinet, it would be very advisable to do so. Sit inside the cabinet on a comfortable chair and relax yourself thoroughly. Note whatever impressions come to you. Pay particular attention to your bodily feelings, no less than your mental states. Do not exaggerate here, or let your imagination have too free play. If your legs should happen to tingle, or the chair to creak, do not put these down to spiritual influence. They may be due to perfectly normal causes. Symptoms of oncoming mediumship. For the first few evenings, you will possibly notice nothing much of interest, although very psychic persons begin to develop almost at once. A peculiar lightness and buzzing is sometimes experienced in the head, together with a sense of numbness in the hands and arms, and sometimes in the feet and legs. The respiration seems to become slower, and so does the heart. Tiny lights and spots in light, or dark spots, appear in the air at a distance of 1 to 2 feet in front of the subject. A peculiar pressure is sometimes experienced on the top of the head, or on the base of the brain, or in the solar plexus. Swishing sounds, as of the sea breaking upon the seashore, may be heard, and a sensation that something inside the head is going round and round in spirals. The head, the hands, and sometimes the whole body break out into a profuse perspiration at this point. These are the first sensations of oncoming mediumship. Very often they are not pleasant for the first few weeks, but if this period be passed, the unpleasant sensations will as a rule vanish, and the subject will then develop true mediumship of one character or another, getting the best results. Just here, it is advisable to state that the would-be medium should not at first sit for the express purpose of cultivating any particular phase of mediumship. He may desire to obtain materialization, but unless he is naturally endowed in this matter, he might sit forever and obtain nothing. Whereas, if he developed whatever phenomena presented themselves, he might very soon develop into a striking medium in some other line. To return, however, to the early development of mediumship. Soon after these early impressions have been noticed, the subject may note for the first time that his mind is peculiarly susceptible to influences of all kinds. He feels as if his mind has been skinned, so to speak, and that he is now exposed to the psychic breezes from every direction. He may become erratic and irritable and develop moods which he himself cannot understand. Peculiar buzzings in the head are sometimes heard. Sometimes cloud-like masses seem to form in space before him, twisting and turning and moving up and down and round about in very irregular motion. As a rule, these clouds appear to be of the consistency of vapor, though they may in time become more and more solid until they become built up into definite forms. Of this, however, later. Early signs and experiences. At this phase of the development, the subject may feel cool breezes blowing upon his hands and face from various directions, breezes which appear to be perfectly physical in character. He may also experience a peculiar sticky sensation on his hands and face, as though cobwebs were applied over the bare skin which is exposed. This cobwebby sensation is very common, and is not limited, as many think, to mediums who obtain materialization. Colors and voices. In the early stage of the development, mediums very often see colors of various shades and hues in space before them. They are unable to tell whether or not these colors have any definite shape or outline. They seem to possess an odd, irregular shape of their own, something like a large blot of ink. At this stage, also, many psychics see faces of friends and relatives, either living or dead, just as they are falling asleep or as they are awakening in the morning, usually the former. They also see many strange faces. These may be mere vague images, or clearly outlined. Instead of the faces, they may hear voices speaking, and the first thing which these voices generally say is the name of the subject himself. After this, the voices may become more and more clear and intense. But such phenomena should be permitted only at stated times, because if they are allowed to develop whenever they may be experienced, trouble may result. Many odd and grotesque figures and shapes may present themselves to the mind's eye at this stage of development. These shapes may be highly colored, or may be almost colorless, seeming to be made of the air itself, yet somehow separated from this in outline. Many of these images are symbolic, though as a rule a few of them are recognizable. More often they represent curious patterns and figures, such as roses, circles, outlines of patterns, such as may be seen on the wallpaper, and occasionally weird and horrible images flash into the mind, to be gone again in the next instant. Unpleasant experiences. If these manifestations develop an unpleasant character at the time, they should be checked instantly. The subject may do this in several ways. First of all, he should build up his physical health. Second, he should see to it that he obtains plenty of sleep. Third, he should exercise his brain as little as possible on anything of this unpleasant character. Fourth, he should keep busily occupied in material, practical things, and leave himself no time to ponder and dwell upon these unpleasant experiences. Fifth, he should avoid by all means daydreaming and never allow his mind to become passive or absent-minded. He should cultivate his objective attention and interest, in short, and focus his whole personality, as it were, between his eyes, so as to have it under thorough control. If he does this, and refuses to sit for development for a short time, he will find that these early unpleasant symptoms, should they develop, will soon wear off. And this advice holds good for any stage in the development of mediumship. Exaggeration and imagination. Many of those who develop psychic phenomena are inclined to exaggerate the importance of the manifestations they receive during the early stages of their mediumship. Everything seems so new and strange to them, so remarkable, so unaccountable, so beyond the experience of the average person, that they feel bound to tell it to everyone they meet, and usually it loses nothing in the telling. They fail to realize that every medium who has been developed has gone through these same early stages, but has progressed beyond them years before. In observing these phenomena in yourself, you must be very careful to distinguish between the facts which really occur and the fantasies of your own excited imagination, which is inclined to extend and amplify these facts beyond all recognition. Thus, suppose a blurred outline of a face presents itself to you. The next day you meet your cousin on the street. You instantly come to the conclusion that the face you saw was that of your cousin, while, as a matter of fact, it might not have borne the least resemblance to him. This is a very simple case, but will serve to explain the point in question. Why and how your power may be lost. If you obtain such phenomena, you must be very careful not to exaggerate them, For if you do, you will quite possibly lose the real sensitiveness that you are beginning to acquire, and this will be replaced by the products of an overexcited imagination. This is a truth well known, as you may see by the following quotation from a work which appeared in 1813 entitled Animal Magnetism by Deleuze. For in it he says, quote, "Do not press the somnambulist too much, for if you do, you will gain nothing. You will even lose the advantages which you might derive from his lucidity. It is possible that you could make him speak upon all the subjects of your personal curiosity, but in that case you will make him leave his own sphere and introduce him in yours. He will no longer have any other resources than yourself. He will utter to you very eloquent discourses, but they will be no more dictated by the external inspirations. They will be the product of his recollections or of his imagination. Perhaps you will also rouse his vanity, and then all is lost. He will not re-enter the circle from which he has wandered. The two states cannot be confounded." End quote. The student who cultivates mediumship should, therefore, be careful to preserve a clear head and a modest estimate of his own phenomena. If he does, he will doubtless progress rapidly and favorably. End of Chapter 1. Recording by Michael Packard.
Chapter 2. Harmonious Conditions. If we exert ourselves in any way whatever, we desire certain conditions in order to bring our powers and faculties into play to the best advantage. If we are undertaking to perform any feat of physical strength, of intellectual or spiritual achievement, we desire to be free from care and worry, distraction and irritation, to be enabled to center and focus the whole of our energy in the channel desired. It is the same with mediumship. Conditions for the exercise of psychic powers. Professor Flerney of Geneva writes in this connection, quote, "As to the influence of various physical and mental conditions upon the exercise of mediumship, my correspondents are unanimous in condemning as absolute hindrances, or at least grave obstacles to the production of phenomena, all such causes as physical exhaustion, disturbing emotions, uneasiness, absorbing thoughts, fatigue, enervation, etc. The conditions required for the successful exercise of mediumistic powers are the same as for the voluntary exercise of any other power: a state of good health, nervous equilibrium, calm, the absence of care, good humor, sympathetic surroundings, etc. Many insist upon moral elevation, purity of conduct, noble aspirations, altruism, etc., saying that these things strengthen mediumship, while the lower sentiments, such as cupidity, pride, jealousy, etc., are the cause of much loss of power. Others have insisted that certain physical conditions have a propitious effect: silence, semi-obscurity, good ventilation, fasting, etc." End quote. Necessity for conditions. Those who do not understand the laws of spiritualism have contended that the conditions demanded by mediums are often absurd, for the reason that they permit trickery. If the conditions permit the practice of fraud, they should not be allowed. Beyond this, any conditions required by the medium should be granted, for the medium alone is the one to know what these conditions should be. Mediumship, doubtless, has its conditions, its own psychic laws, just as any other exercise of the inner powers. Many skeptics do not see this. They say, if you can produce these phenomena, you must be able to produce them at any time, just as we can always produce the same effects in a chemical or physical laboratory. Why all this fuss about conditions, etc.? But they fail to take into consideration human nature and the fact that psychic laws and physical laws are different. We can easily prove this. Conditions in art. Take any musical composer, or any artist who paints, and seat him at a table with instructions to compose a sonata or paint a wonderful picture within half an hour. Suppose that during all the time the work is in progress, noise and flurry is constantly going on in the same room. The desk at which the artist works is being shaken, children are continually running in and out of the room, etc. Do you think that, under such conditions, a masterpiece in either music or art could be produced? Could a poet compose a sonnet under such conditions? Certainly he could not. The exercise of mediumistic power is assuredly as delicate, as subtle, as refined, as easily disturbed, as any of these productions of the genius of man. How absurd, therefore, to pretend or contend that mediums should be able to exercise their powers whenever they want them, under any conditions, and to contend further that if they fail to do so, they are therefore frauds and humbugs. For the successful exercise of mediumship or psychic power in any direction, the essentials which have been mentioned above must be fulfilled, as well as any others which the medium may feel are required. These must by all means be granted, for if they are not, it is highly probable that no phenomena at all will be obtained. Harmony all important. Harmony is the keynote of successful mediumship, harmony of physical, mental, and spiritual life. This is only carrying to its logical conclusion what we observe every day all around us. Have we not all felt immediately upon meeting certain persons that they were attractive or repellent to us? We felt either drawn or repulsed inwardly for no reason that we could define. Many theories have been advanced to explain this fact, but the most probable is that, surrounding each individual, there is an aura or psychic atmosphere which surrounds him like a halo or sheath, extending some distance outward from the body, and varying with the individual temperament, emotions, and the physical and mental health. If these auras are sympathetic, if they blend one with another, then we have attraction, leading in many cases to love at first sight. If the opposite conditions exist, we have instinctive dislikes, which are generally correct. As the poet said, "I do not like you, Dr. Fell. The reason why, I cannot tell." Mental harmony. Next to physical harmony comes mental harmony, and here is a wide field for observation and experiment. All spiritualists know that persons of certain temperaments must be excluded from serious circles, if the better class of phenomena are to be obtained. Such persons include the flippant, the arrogant, the unduly skeptical, the frivolous, etc. In addition to this, however, finer and more subtle points of mental harmony must be adjusted in our mental scales. It is advisable, whenever possible, to bring together persons having more or less the same point of view, interests, and sympathies. Sympathetic people always obtain better phenomena than the extremely intellectual ones. In the latter, the mind is, so to speak, hard, unyielding, and tends to build up a wall or barrier between itself and the medium, which it is difficult or even impossible for the latter to break through. We have known of several cases in which mediums were unable to obtain any results at all for individuals of the very intellectual and, so to speak, critical type of mind, whereas they could obtain an abundance of striking manifestations for the sympathetic and more congenial natures. Excessive gravity. At the same time, extreme gravity and seriousness on all occasions is to be avoided. Every person who investigates spiritualism should see to it that he preserves throughout his sense of humor, and his continued contact with and interest in the things of this world. If he does not do this, he is liable to become unduly swayed and overbalanced by the messages which are given to him, and by the startling and at first sight almost appalling fact that communication with the spirits of the departed has really been established. If he does not preserve his balance and common sense at such times, he is liable to become not only unduly credulous, but even to fly off the handle altogether, and his mind may in some instances actually become unhinged. Be careful, therefore, to keep the compartments of your mind watertight, as it were, and not allow your interest for the things spiritual to overflow and swamp your interest in things material. Spiritual harmony. Next we come to spiritual sympathy and harmony, which is perhaps most important of all in the formation of successful circles. This would include an interest in spiritual things, aspirations, benevolence, sympathy, a more or less religious turn of mind, tolerance, and the ability to see things from the standpoint of another, this being sympathy in its broadest sense. It is the blending together of a number of temperaments of this character which constitutes the successful circle. The reason for this harmony and delicate adjustment of conditions may be seen readily enough by a reference to the phenomena not only of the mental, but of the physical world. For instance, if you set into vibration a tuning fork, this will emit a note of a certain pitch. Another tuning fork, distant many feet from the first, will instantly vibrate in unison if the two are attuned one to the other. But unless the tuning forks are adjusted at precisely the right pitch, they will not respond, and 1,000 tuning forks may be placed around the room, but none of them will respond in any way to the vibration of the first. This crude analogy, drawn from the physical world, will show us how essential harmony is, and if this be true in material phenomena, more certainly is it true in the mental and spiritual realms. Harmony and vibration. Every individual is said to vibrate at a certain rate. This is his own pitch, so to say, and no two human beings are alike. This definite rate of vibration doubtless corresponds to the personality of the individual, and, though no two can be absolutely alike, those who approximate each other the nearest would be the most sympathetic, and would be the most drawn one to the other. And if this is true of spirits incarnate here in this life, it is doubtless true when applied to the relations between our own spirits and the spirits of those who have passed over. There is an old saying that like attracts like. If the tone of the circle, and of the individuals composing it, is high, the aspirations elevated and pure, that circle will attract to it spirits from the other side having the same vibrations as itself. The circle will, in fact, only come in contact with good and not evil spirits. Certainly there are exceptions to every rule, but the above is the general law which may be stated in broad terms as true. For, were this not the case, we might contend that no such thing as justice existed in the universe, and that chance and not moral law held all in its sway. But we know that this is not the case, inasmuch as we feel assured in our heart of hearts that beauty, truth, and justice are the foundation stones upon which this universe is built. We might rightly suppose that this is in every case the truth, and that a circle formed by serious-minded investigators, having in view only the highest and best motives, would draw to them helpful and loving spirits from the great beyond, and the history of spiritualism proves this to be the fact. How to fit yourself for a circle. The method you should follow to fit yourself most effectually for becoming a member of one of these advanced circles is as follows. You should perfect and make as wholesome as possible the physical body in which you live. This is brought about by paying particular attention to the diet, and by taking an abundance of exercise, deep breathing, and frequent baths. Many spiritualists have become vegetarians with this object in view, and also non-smokers and abstainers from alcohol. Tea and coffee are also debarred in some quarters, but such strict measures are usually advised only for those who are striving for individual spiritual perfection, and need not necessarily be followed by one who is a member of a large circle. Of course, such measures cannot fail to benefit an individual in any case. The keystone of the arch. Cultivate cheerfulness, altruism, and a simple, wholesome point of view, banishing fear as you would the devil, and never allowing it for a moment to dominate or enter into you. Preserve a sane religious balance, and endeavor in any way possible to cultivate sympathy for the point of view of others, no matter how prejudiced and narrow it may be. Keep your mind lifted up, elevated, and, as Andrew Jackson Davis said, under all circumstances keep an even mind. If you do not naturally possess it, cultivate an insight into things spiritual, and above all, true benevolence and sympathy. This is the keystone of the arch erected to and supporting self-perfection. End of Chapter 2.
Chapter 3 of Your Psychic Powers and How to Develop Them. Recording by Pamela Krantz. Chapter 3: Fear and How to Banish It. We are our own greatest enemies. We create the majority of the ills from which we suffer. In psychic investigation, more people have suffered from fear than from any other depressing emotion. But in 9 cases out of 10, these fears have been perfectly groundless, and the subject has had all his fears and worry for nothing. He has crossed his bridges before coming to them. Were he to reflect for a moment, he would find that the terrible things he feared very rarely came to him, that the majority of the experiences which he actually went through were of such a nature that he needn't have feared them at all. Fear wrecks, faith saves. Fear is not only useless, for the reason that it prevents nothing, but it is actually harmful from this double standpoint. In the first place, it helps to induce the condition we are fearing. As Job said, "That which I greatly feared has come upon me." He thought about and dreaded certain conditions so much that he doubtless created them, while had he not done so they would never have come upon him. Professor William James gives us a very good illustration of the way in which fear sometimes brings about its own fulfillment. He says, "Suppose that, for example, I am climbing in the Alps, and have the ill luck to work myself into a position from which the only escape is by a terrible leap. Being without similar experience, I have no evidence of my ability to perform it successfully, but hope and confidence in myself make me sure that I shall not miss my aim, and nerve my feet to execute what without those subjective emotions would perhaps have been impossible. But suppose that on the contrary the emotions of fear and mistrust predominate, or suppose that I feel that it would be sinful to act upon an assumption unverified by previous experience, why then I shall hesitate so long that at last, exhausted and trembling, and launching myself in a moment of despair, I miss my foothold and roll into the abyss. In this case, and this is one of an immense class, the part of wisdom clearly is to believe what one desires, for the belief is one of the indispensable preliminary conditions for the realization of its object. There are then cases where faith creates its own verification. Believe and you shall be right, for you shall save yourself. Doubt and you shall again be right, for you shall perish. The only difference is that to believe is greatly to your advantage. The obvious lesson to be drawn from this is that you should not fear the unknown or unseen until you have had just cause to do so. If you do, it will predispose you to experience the very manifestations you most dread. Evil effects of fears upon the body. In the second place, fear has a destructive and depressing effect upon the body. It depletes the vitality, lowers the respiration, and doubly incapacitates you from performing any serious rational work, or carrying on any rational common sense train of thought. Fear, therefore, is certainly to be avoided, for it helps nobody and harms everybody. But, the reader may object, I cannot control my fear so easily. It is a thing beyond my power. I do not pursue fear. It pursues and overtakes me. To a certain extent this may be true. There are two kinds of fear, the unreasoning, instinctive fear, and the conscious, reflective fear. The former is a relic of our lowly ancestry and is shared by all the higher animals. We cannot help that, but such fear, as a rule, is only momentary and is over in a few instants. We have the impulse to flee, etc., which demands immediate expression, but this instinctive fear may be overcome by the mind. Our reason tells us, upon second thought, that we have no cause to fear, and we stop abashed and ashamed of ourselves. This is not the fear which we have to correct, as a rule, since it is bodily rather than mental, and of short duration. The kind of fear to fear. The conscious, mental fear is that which bothers us and which we should learn to cure. We are sufficiently advanced in civilization and in the understanding of things spiritual to know that all is natural. Nothing is supernatural. Even if a spirit returns to us, that is a natural event, though it may not be a common or ordinary event, and for this reason we call it supernormal. But why should we be afraid of the spirit of a dearly beloved friend or relative, or even the spirit of a stranger coming to us in this way, any more than we should be afraid of it when coming to us in the flesh? It is the same spirit. In one case possessing a physical body, in the other case animating only an ethereal body. Of what is there to be afraid? Spirits are but human beings, such as ourselves. We are spirits here and now, just as much as we ever will be. Spirits are, in fact, human beings who have passed through a certain experience, called death. And as Professor Minot Savage says, they are just folks. Why, therefore, should we be afraid of them? The powers of darkness. We must school the mind to reflection, and by due exercise of the reason and the will, not to be afraid of such happenings, but rather to accept them and be thankful for them, and to treat them either as scientific happenings or as spiritual events of great significance and help. In either case there is truly no cause to fear. It is true that in the case of many persons, darkness brings with it a peculiar sense of dread, which is experienced by nearly all children, and which is to a certain extent shared by many animals. A dog will go to the door of a dark room, peer in, and slink away. Even insects often refuse to go into dark places. The cat alone seems to enjoy the uncanny sensation which accompanies darkness. And we know that cats are proverbial ghost lovers, while dogs are the reverse. It may be that there is more truth in this belief than many realize. We know that the orthodox devil was known as the king of the powers of darkness, and all evil things are associated with that state. On the other hand, Jesus was said to be the light of the world, and light always accompanied spiritual manifestations, as it does today. The expression made use of by Mr. Hamlin Garland some years ago in his book, The Tyranny of the Dark, may therefore have a certain foundation. There are perhaps principalities and powers which can operate more freely and fully in the dark than in the light, but only if they are allowed to do so by the fear and the attitude and mind of the person experiencing them. We remember that in Pilgrim's Progress the travelers were repeatedly warned that no harm could come to them so long as they faced their spiritual enemies. And we must remember the words of the greatest of all psychics, "Resist the devil and he will flee from thee." All we have to do, therefore, in order to prevent the domination of any evil thought or power is to fight it, resist it, meet it strongly and courageously with calmness and decision, and it will melt before your attack like dew before the rays of the morning sun. Evil emotions. Mr. Horace Fletcher, in his little book on Happiness, says some very good things regarding fear, which he defines as an expression of fear thought. Fear thought, according to this author, is the self-imposed or self-permitted suggestion of inferiority. It is both a cause and an effect of selfishness. It is the taproot of evil. The body is a mirror in which all states of the soul are reflected. Perhaps the most extensive of all the morbid mental conditions which reflect themselves so disastrously on the human system is the state of fear. Dr. Hack Tuke, in his book, The Influence of the Mind upon the Body, cites a number of well authenticated instances of disease having been produced by fear or fright. Insanity, idiocy, paralysis of various muscles and organs, profuse perspiration, turning the hair gray in a short time, baldness, nervous shock followed by fatal anemia, malformation of the embryo, and even skin and other diseases, apparently more removed than these from the effects of the mind, were traced to the effects of fear and other mental disturbances. He pointed out also that epidemics such as cholera, smallpox, diphtheria, and other malignant diseases obtain a footing in a community largely through the fear of the inhabitants, and that hundreds and even thousands of persons fall victims to their own mental conditions. How fear causes sickness. How does fear operate upon the body to produce sickness? Largely by paralyzing the nerve centers, especially those of the vasomotor nerves, thus producing not only muscular relaxation, but capillary congestions of all kinds. It is an interesting fact that fear and all depressing emotions of a similar nature serve to constrict or contract the body, while mirth, love, altruism, and all the higher emotions serve to produce both physical and mental relaxation, opening up the mental and physiological doorways of the organism. The term "frightened to death" is not a mere expression, but is founded upon valid physiological and psychological laws. A Southern physician has reported an interesting case. It was that of a big, burly Negro who supposed that he had been fatally shot. Fear had seized him with tremendous power. He shook like an aspen leaf. He bordered on the state of collapse, and death seemed imminent. Not finding any blood, the examining physician ordered all his clothes removed, and while he was being undressed, a flattened bullet fell upon the floor. The doctor exhibited the bullet to the frightened patient, explaining that he had had a miraculous escape, whereupon his circulation was immediately restored, his countenance improved, his temperature became normal, and the look of life returned to his eyes, which had been fixed with the gaze of death, while a broad grin crept over his face. The Negro got down from the operating table and dressed, apologized for the fuss he had caused, and walked home. Fear is contagious. Fear has the peculiar power of being extremely contagious. Under the proper conditions, fear manifested by one person is instantly communicated to the entire company. They feel little chills run up and down their spines, their hair begins to stand on end, and a cold perspiration breaks out here and there over the body. This shows the profound effect which this emotion has upon the bodily functions, and also how easily it may be acquired without reason. Fear has the power of almost stopping the heart, and paralyzing the entire nervous system. A peculiar fatigue is also caused by fear, as has been proved by delicate experiments. A natural and normal way to overcome fear under such conditions is to open the mind to natural faith and normal trust. Let the psychic forces be allied with faith and health. Let fear be finally and forever cast down and banished from the mental domain. This may often be brought about by reasoning, though an effort of will is generally necessary also. A determined opposition accompanied by trust, faith in wise protection, faith in your own powers, and in the help of friendly spiritual monitors, are of the greatest use and benefit in overcoming this great monster, fear. The fear of evil spirits. Many people are afraid of evil spirits, being alarmed lest they should influence them against their will and cause them to do certain things which they would not normally care to do, even to the point of obsessing them. There is a real danger here to a certain extent, which will be dwelt upon and explained in the chapter on obsession, but let it be pointed out that the only way to prevent such things is to keep up a normal, healthful, resistant attitude of mind, and not to give way to fear, which would be doing the very thing to invite attack. Let us recall once more the words of Job in this connection. So long as the sea walls or dikes of Holland are sound and unimpaired, the ocean is kept within its proper limits and cannot break through and flood the land, as it sometimes does when these walls are destroyed. As we know, a tiny little hole through which the merest trickle of water can pass, will, unless repaired, soon become a wide crevice and then a roaring torrent. The most important thing to do is to check this in its inception, for it is easy to prevent the ingress of the water, if taken in time. Better still, it would be far easier to keep the sea walls in such repair that accidents of this kind would be impossible, for prevention is better than cure. Applying this to the case before us, we can see that the very first symptoms of fear must be checked as soon as they arise, for if they are allowed to continue, they will spread and work havoc in the mind, just as the waters would work havoc upon the land. The thing to do is to keep the mind so guarded, strengthened, and repaired by healthful exercise, intelligent cultivation, and control in the exercise of the will, that fear can never batter down its ramparts, and even should it attack the citadel of the mind, it would be quite unable to find a lodgment within this impregnable fortress. the fear of being hypnotized. What has been said applies also to the action of hypnotic influences, which many persons fear greatly. They are afraid of being hypnotized by some distant operator, and this fear sometimes becomes with them a veritable phobia, so that we occasionally find insane asylum patients who have become completely unhinged on account of this fear. We can see from this how useless, how exceedingly harmful fear of this character is, and it is more than useless, it is ridiculous. No one can be hypnotized against his own will by a distant operator in this way, as many suppose. If they feel influences of this character, these feelings are the result of their own disordered imagination and are not due to any outside influence whatever. An individual really hypnotizes himself, the operator directing his own mental powers into certain channels so that this is brought about. If he resists the suggestion, as every one can do at first, it is impossible for any one to hypnotize him. Why such fears are groundless. The only way in which a person can be hypnotized from a distance is the following. If an operator has hypnotized his subject a great many times and repeatedly suggested to him, when in the hypnotic trance, that he is becoming more suggestible, that he can easily go off to sleep, that he has only to think of the operator in order to fall asleep, etc., he may succeed in making the subject so sensitive, after a certain length of time, that this condition is really brought about. The subject tends to fall into trance on the slightest provocation, but such cases are abnormal and are rarely met with, and, as I have just said, this condition cannot be brought about until the subject has been hypnotized several times and these suggestions given to him. These are well-known facts which any experienced hypnotist will sustain. This being so, it may readily be seen how absurd it is to fear telepathic suggestion from a distant operator, whom perhaps you have never seen. It is entirely illusory, and you need in reality have no fear whatever in this connection. The will, if exercised, is supreme. End of Chapter 3.
Chapter 4. The Subconscious. In this chapter, I shall take up and try to make plain to the student the nature and functions of the subconscious mind. This is the greatest of all stumbling blocks to many spiritualists. Its possibilities, and at the same time its limitations, should be made clear to the student at the beginning of his studies. Otherwise, he is sure to get in trouble later on, not only with himself and with the phenomena he is studying, but with all persons who discuss these subjects with him and try to persuade him that the whole of spiritualism may be accounted for by the powers of the subconscious. What is the subconscious mind? First of all, what is the subconscious mind? We do not know exactly, but a great deal has been found out concerning it within the past quarter of a century. 20 years ago, when Thomson J. Hudson wrote his famous work, The Law of Psychic Phenomena, very little was known of the subconscious. Nearly everything which has been discovered about it has been learned since he wrote. His attitude is doubtless well known to the majority of my readers. It is that man has two minds, the conscious and the subconscious, or, as he preferred to express it, the objective and the subjective minds. The first of these is the conscious mind, the everyday, reasoning mind. The second is that vast realm in which occur the phenomena of dreams, hypnotism, insanity, hysteria, clairvoyance, telepathy, and all kindred psychic phenomena. He placed the objective mind in the cerebrum, or fore part of the brain, and the subjective mind in the cerebellum, or hinder part of the brain. Two minds or one. But this dual conception of the mind is today given up by practically all psychologists. They admit that the mind is, in a certain sense, dual, but it is believed that both minds are in reality one, a part of which is conscious, and of the greater part, of which we know nothing. The analogy of the iceberg has often been used. A small percentage of this emerges above the water, and this we see and know, but the greater part of the mountain of ice is below the surface, and this we do not know through our senses. Yet it is all one iceberg. In the same way, there is only one mind, But when the searchlight of consciousness is turned upon certain areas, those areas become illuminated, and we know, or are conscious of, those parts. All else remains in the dim obscurity beyond, in the great storehouse of the subconscious mind. The powers of the subconscious. It may easily be proved that the subconscious mind acquires far more information, even through the senses, than does the conscious mind. The following simple experiment will prove this. Lead a person into a strange room, and ask him to observe as many things in it as he possibly can. Suppose he remains 5 seconds in that room. He is then quickly removed, and the door shut. If, now, he is asked to tell you all the things that he remembers having seen, he will probably be enabled to remember 10 or 15 of them. But if you were to hypnotize that person, he would then describe to you, under hypnotic influence, 40 or 50 things which were in the room. This shows us that the subconscious mind, which we reached through hypnotism, has been able to perceive or take in many more things than the conscious mind. This happens to us every day. Dreams. It is the same with dreams. If, when out walking, we should happen to drop a brooch pin or a piece of money, we might be totally unconscious of the fact, but the subconscious mind would perceive and record it. That night, in sleep, we might have a dream in which a figure appeared to us and told us that the article had been lost, and that it would be found in such and such a place. On looking, the next morning, sure enough, there it was. Here we see that the subconscious has perceived a certain fact which the conscious mind did not notice. For long it was thought that this power signified some supernormal faculty of the subconscious mind. But in most cases it is not necessary to suppose this, for, as the last experiment showed us, the subconscious mind takes in many things which the conscious mind does not, and only the most striking and interesting facts rise into consciousness. Of the thousands of events going on all around us every day, we perceive but a few. All the rest are ignored, though they are lodged within the great mental storehouse within us. The memory of the subconscious. The powers of the subconscious mind are indeed great. It forgets nothing, and facts which have entirely slipped from the conscious mind are retained within it, and may be recalled years later, or may suddenly flash into the memory of their own accord. They may come into the mind in the form of some simple thought or memory, just as any other thought or memory would, or they may come to us in more startling form. They may be, as we say, externalized, that is, projected upward from the subconscious into the conscious mind, forcibly and dramatically, as a bombshell might be exploded within it. In these cases, the thought may strike us as coming wholly from without, and not from within ourselves at all. One or two examples will make this clear. You have mislaid a book. You cannot remember where it is. The natural process would be to recollect. In the case of an individual who is psychic or mediumistic, the externalization may take more startling form. He may hear a voice telling him to look under certain papers upon the library table, and sure enough, upon looking there, the book is found. Or he may have a mental picture of himself leaving the book in that place. Or he may feel a hand gently pushing him in the direction of the table. Or he may see a figure standing before him and pointing to the hidden book. In all these cases, it is improbable that the voice, the touch, and the figure were real, that is, that they came from some spirit friend. They may have done so, but it is true that, in many cases at least, they are methods by which the subconscious mind externalizes or reproduces its hidden memories in dramatic form, just as they are reproduced in dreams or in visions of the crystal ball. The psychic diaphragm. The subconscious mind, therefore, may be looked upon as composed of a number of strata, like a layer cake, which are normally more or less separated from one another by a sort of psychic membrane or diaphragm which is impervious. At times, this psychic diaphragm becomes thinned. In that case, we remember our dreams of the previous night, or we have wonderful constructions of genius, the productions of musical prodigies, etc. The subconscious mind works out the problems, and the finished product is projected into the conscious mind in its completed form. That is why it appears to us so marvelous. On the other hand, if a part of the subconscious mind is diseased, as may sometimes happen, then we have hysteria, obsession, and insanity. It will be seen, therefore, that both good and evil may result from this thinning or puncturing of the psychic diaphragm, separating the conscious from the subconscious mind. If the mind be healthy and is kept so, only good will result. Psychic powers will be cultivated, and helpful advice will be given to the subject thenceforward. If, on the other hand, the mind becomes in any way deranged or diseased, then harm may result, and the individual may be sorry that he has ruptured this dividing diaphragm instead of preserving it intact. It is all a question of care, good health, good judgment, and a healthy psychic, mental, and physical life. Once this psychic membrane has been, so to say, punctured, it is very difficult to heal it up again, and great care must be exercised in developing these subconscious phenomena. We shall discuss this more fully, however, in the chapter devoted to obsession. The subconscious mind should be made our friend and not our enemy. We should train it carefully, for, though it is a good servant, it is a bad master. It should always be kept in check, and dominated and controlled by the conscious mind. When this is the case, all goes well. How the subconscious reckons time. The subconscious has, among other faculties, the power of reckoning time in a most remarkable manner. Many of my readers have doubtless conducted the following experiment for themselves. On going to bed, you have said to yourself, "Now I wish to wake tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock promptly, because I have such and such a train to catch." There is no alarm clock in the house, but, promptly at 7, you awake. That this is no mere chance coincidence has been proven by a number of cases, which have been collected, and the fact has also been proven experimentally on hypnotic subjects. Thus they have been told that in, say, 9,750 seconds, they would perform a certain action. Then they were immediately awakened. As soon as awake, they knew nothing of the suggestion which had been given to them, and nothing of the action they were to perform, and yet precisely in 9,750 seconds they performed the action in question. We see, therefore, that the subconscious mind has the faculty of reckoning time in a very remarkable manner, and this is but one of its mysterious powers. The subconscious rules the body. Another of its remarkable manifestations is the power which it possesses over the bodily organization. By means of suggestion, the pulse has been raised or slowed, the temperature has been elevated or lowered, the various secretions of the body have been altered, and many similar phenomena which are well known to anyone who has read upon this subject. One of the most striking cases, doubtless, is that of Mademoiselle Ilma X. A pair of cold scissors was applied to her chest, and it was suggested that these were red hot, and that they were burning the flesh. In a few moments an angry red mark appeared, corresponding to the shape of the scissors, and the next day a genuine blister had been created which took several days to heal. Here we see the power of the subconscious mind in affecting the body, and even the local tissues, to a remarkable extent. If this is true, and the body can be harmed in this way, it can doubtless also be cured. We here enter the field of suggestion and psychotherapy, which will be treated more fully in Chapter 30. How to give your own subconscious mind suggestions. One of the best methods of treating yourself is by suggesting certain desirable things just as you are falling off to sleep. Thus, if anything is wrong with you physically, mentally, or spiritually, suggest to yourself, the last thing at night, as you are falling to sleep, that all will be well, that the trouble will be removed during the night, that you will wake up refreshed and invigorated, that there be no pain, no unpleasant feelings or emotions in the morning, etc. Suggest, in fact, whatever you desire to have accomplished, and you will find that, during the night, this will have been effected, and that your bodily or mental ills will have disappeared as the result of your autosuggestion during the hours of sleep. Here again, we shall be enabled to see the remarkable powers of the subconscious mind brought into play and clearly demonstrated. Spirit messages and the subconscious. Now, these faculties of the subconscious mind explain a certain number of spirit messages which are received at seances. Let me illustrate this in the following manner. Just before leaving your home to join a circle, you glance at the evening paper. Your attention has been attracted to the leading articles. Apparently, you have seen nothing else. At the seance that evening, the name of a friend of yours is spelled out, and the announcement that this friend has been killed that day by falling from the 4th story of his residence. At first sight, this seems a very good test message, but on going home and again looking at your evening paper, you find a small article tucked away in the corner of the paper stating these facts. Therefore, probably what happened was this. Your subconscious mind perceived and took in these facts without their even rising to consciousness, and at the séance, they were given out either by yourself or by the medium who obtained them from your mind by telepathy. In this way, many messages have been explained and shown to be due to the workings of the subconscious mind, and not to spirits at all. We must, therefore, always be on our guard against these possibilities. The structure of the mind. The older conception of the human mind was that it was a single entity, an individual thing, a sort of sphere incapable of division. This was, in fact, one of Plato's main arguments for the immortality of the soul. Unfortunately, modern science has destroyed this illusion. We now know that the human mind is a composite and not a simple thing. To use a rough analogy, it has been proved that the mind is somewhat like a rope, composed of a number of strands twisted together. Under normal, healthy conditions, this rope remains one, the strands are united. But under certain abnormal states or conditions, these strands may be divided up into several groups, and they would all pull in different directions. What holds these strands together normally? First, good health. Then cheerfulness, attention, concentration, will, and an interest in objective things. What favors this disintegration process, this dissociation of the mind, as it is called? The exact opposite of all this, a run-down or fatigued condition, introspection, and particularly all continued subjective practices and the too passive attitude of the mind. If we lose contact with and interest in the objective world, if we go inside our heads and spin romances and dream daydreams to too great an extent, if we gaze blankly into space, thinking of nothing in particular, if we allow the mind to become too passive and do not exercise our intellect in a normal, healthy manner, this disintegration is likely to take place. The strands of the rope become separated, and then the mind may go to pieces, and spirit obsession and even insanity may result. How to heal a sick mind. Of course, this is only a crude analogy. The mind is not like a rope, and cannot be divided into strands in the same way, but it is an analogy which will help us. The only way to heal and restore a mind in this condition is to weave or weld together these separate strands and bind them up again into one solid, single rope, as it were. This may often be done by hypnotism, but great care must be exercised in doing this, for if it is not rightly applied by an expert operator, the mind may become still more disintegrated, and the last state of that man shall be worse than the first. Now, these separate strands of the mind, to return to our analogy of the rope, may form different selves. Each self may possess a certain identity and individuality of its own, and they may all pull in different directions. That is, they may all exercise their own functions and powers, and think their own thoughts. There is no one self anymore. It has gone to pieces. These various selves may alternate one with another in the same individual, and then we have those interesting cases known to us as alternating personality. If there are two of these, we have double personality. If there are three or more of these personalities, we have a case of multiple personality. There are sometimes 6 or 7 of these, and in one case, it was reported that there were 10, all in the same individual, all alternating with one another, all having their own prejudices, likes, dislikes, interests, points of view, and knowledge of persons and things. Many such cases have been cured by welding together several of these selves by hypnotic suggestion, when the original man was restored. The differences between spirits and subconscious selves. Now, if this be true, and it has been proved to be true by many well-authenticated cases, how distinguish these selves from true spirits? This is a very complex question which cannot be fully answered in this place, because we must understand, first of all, more of the nature of the subconscious mind and its powers. But one simple test can be applied, which is this. All these personalities, or parts of selves, derive their knowledge of men and things through the same source, namely the 5 senses. None of them can possibly know any fact which was not supplied to them through sight, hearing, touch, etc. So that if any of them manifest supernormal knowledge, this proves to us at once either that some external intelligence is present, or that this personality, whatever it may be, has acquired this knowledge in some occult manner, by telepathy, clairvoyance, etc. Which of these 2 interpretations is the correct one, I shall endeavor to answer in another place. Personalities created by hypnotism. It may seem incomprehensible to many how the human mind can become split up or dissociated in this manner. They think that this is rather a far-fetched theory, and prefer to believe the simple theory of spiritism, as applied even to the most simple facts. This might be admissible, but for the following consideration. We can trace a gradual series of intermediate steps, all the way from normal states of mind to these dissociations. In daydreaming and absent-mindedness, we see the first of these steps. When we hypnotize a subject and suggest to him that he is Napoleon Bonaparte or Julius Caesar, and he enacts the part with due gravity, we can hardly suppose that Napoleon Bonaparte or Julius Caesar really returned to manifest through him. And should any be inclined to accept this view, it may be said that the hypnotic subject will just as easily carry out the suggestion that he is a lion or a bear or a bird flying in the air, and no one, we imagine, would contend that a lion or a bear or a bird really manifested at such times. So, therefore, we see that one part of the mind may enact a little comedy by itself, without the knowledge of another part, and from this simple fact to the most striking phenomena of the subconscious, we can trace a definite chain of connection. The picture-forming faculty of the mind. One of the most striking powers which the subconscious mind possesses is its ability to reconstruct mental pictures or photographs of distant or imaginary persons. Your mind contains a whole picture gallery of all your friends, which you see, as it were, in your mind's eye. This is limited not only to your friends and relatives, but to heroes of books you have read, and even to imaginary personages. These pictures are not set and inert, but live and move, and we place the characters in various situations and cause them to move, act, and talk as human beings would do. Thus, suppose your friend A, or David Harum, or some imaginary personage, were thought by you to be on a journey. You would imagine them to be in various situations, and would picture to yourself precisely how they would act in each situation, and would put into their mouths arguments and conversations which they would carry on with those about them. This faculty which the mind possesses is a very peculiar one, and its functions are technically known as spiritoid functions. They have a great bearing upon spiritism. How dream personalities talk. These phenomena show us how easy it is for the subconscious to imagine that various personages are present, carrying on a conversation with us, etc., whereas, as a matter of fact, they are not present at all, but were invented by us. If, therefore, at a séance, some exalted personage appears and claims to communicate, we must always assure ourselves, first of all, that this personage is not one of these semi-conscious or subconscious creations, and must make him give proof of his own identity. This faculty of the mind is again seen in dreams. In dreams, we create situations in a similar manner, and imagine that other personages are present talking to us. We have long debates and arguments with such personages, and sometimes they beat us out. So you see how important it is to be sure that the intelligences which communicate at séances are not creations, but are really individualities, as they claim to be. How to distinguish true from false. How are we to prove this and make this distinction, you may say? The following is the first method. All our knowledge, whether it is conscious or subconscious, is supposed to be obtained through the five senses. The subconscious is built upon the facts obtained by means of hearing, sight, touch, etc. Now, if the communicating intelligence tells us many facts, as proof of its identity, which the mind of the medium never knew, we have fairly good proof of identity, or at least that the knowledge given was obtained by some supernormal means. But decisive proof is not yet obtained. We know that there are other methods of obtaining supernormal information, for instance, telepathy, clairvoyance, etc. Adding these powers to the subconscious faculties of the medium, we have often a difficult task to prove that the intelligence which communicates with us is really the personage it claims to be. Repeated questions must be asked, absolute proof of identity must be insisted upon, and in this way only can we be sure that we have passed beyond the limitations of the subconscious mind of the medium, and that we are really obtaining messages direct from the spirit world. Why and how spirits prove their identity. This proof of identity is really the great problem and the first point to solve. Let me make this plain. Suppose that a cousin of yours had disappeared 12 years ago. One day you receive a call over the telephone and a voice says to you, "I am your cousin, so-and-so. I demand my share of your uncle's will." Naturally, you would reply, "How do I know that you are so-and-so?" In daily life, it would be an easy matter to prove this. He could appear before you in his physical body, and you could identify him, more or less easily in most cases. But suppose he were so placed that he could never see you personally. In such a case, how could he prove to you that he really was the person in question? He would have to relate to you a number of personal and detailed incidents in his past life, which he would be the only likely person to know, or relate facts which only he and you knew, or tell you things which you did not know, but which you afterwards found out to be correct. If you received a number of these replies, you would be right in concluding that he really was the person at the other end of the line, and this is the way in which spirits prove to us their identity. Until they do so, we can never be sure that the teachings they give are correct. If they succeed in proving their identity, we may then accept their word as to the conditions of the next life and other matters, since they were always truthful people in this life, and we have no reason to suppose that they are other than truthful now. How we obtain spirit messages through the subconscious. The subconscious is the channel through which we obtain spirit messages, in nearly all cases. That is, they come through, or by means of, the subconscious mind, and it therefore assists the spirits to communicate. The spirit can manipulate or act upon the subconscious, while it cannot readily affect the conscious mind. This we can see ourselves in the following way. Many of us have noticed that just as we are dropping off to sleep, a forgotten memory has flashed into our mind. It could not find its way to our conscious attention while the latter was busy with the day's activities. But as soon as the conscious mind became passive, then the subconscious had the power to send up this memory or message of warning. It is the same in the case of spirits who communicate. They are only enabled to do so when the conscious mind is in abeyance, quieted, or abstracted, more or less completely, as in a trance. Then the spirit is enabled to act upon the subconscious mind of the medium, and, through it, to reach us still in the body. The subconscious is, therefore, the true medium or vehicle for the manifestation of discarnate spirits, and this will become more apparent when we come to consider the phenomena of trance, which will be dealt with more fully in a later chapter. End of Chapter 4.
Chapter 5 of Your Psychic Powers and How to Develop Them. Recording by Cynthia Sheeler. Chapter 5. Orthodox theology has always taught us that, when we die, we pass into either one of two places, heaven or hell. The Catholic Church introduces a third intermediary state, purgatory, and when in this state, souls may be helped either by those who have passed over or by the prayers of the living. It will thus be seen that, in this respect at least, the Catholic Church approaches nearer than any other religion the doctrines of spiritualism. Information regarding the spirit world has come to us in various ways. Seers or clairvoyants have gone on spiritual excursions into the spiritual world and have told us, on coming back, what they have remembered of their clairvoyant visions. Moses, St. John Swedenborg, Andrew Jackson Davis, and others were seers of this type. On the other hand, we have the direct statements of spirits who have come back and related to us the precise conditions existing in the next world. From both these sources, spiritualists have succeeded in constructing a fairly complete representative picture of the next life and its various activities. I propose here to give a rapid and more or less dogmatic resume of these teachings, without fully endorsing them myself, but merely asking the reader to form his own opinion concerning them. There are various contradictory teachings regarding the future state which have been given us from time to time in the past, and it has been held by many that because of these contradictions, none of them can be trusted. Consequently, none of the descriptions can be true. Thus, spirits who return through many French mediums declare that reincarnation is a fact, while those who return through English and American mediums declare that it is not a fact, etc. How are we to account for these discrepancies? As this is a stumbling block to many spiritualists, the reason for these contradictions must be given at once. The answer is, as a matter of fact, simple enough. Spirits tell us that, after death, they are by no means omniscient. On the contrary, they enter the next life as before said, carrying with them all their prejudices, beliefs, and preconceived opinions. Now, this being the case, we can see that a spirit who, when alive, believed in reincarnation would, after death, continue to believe in it, and he would naturally gather round him or drift into the company of those who also believed in it. In returning through a medium, therefore, he would state dogmatically that reincarnation was true. He would merely express his own belief, which might or might not be true. On many points of this nature we have no absolute means of arriving at the truth. Spirits tell us their convictions, their beliefs, and these are founded on observation or the wisdom of those spirits who have progressed greatly since their departure from earth. The doctrine of zones and spheres. Many spirits teach us that the spirit world is composed of a number of zones and spheres, one upon the other. Some have stated that there are 32 such zones, others 16, but the greater number have declared that there are but 7, beginning with the one nearest the earth, in which are earthbound spirits, and progressing gradually until they are inhabited by more and more spiritualized beings. These zones are said to exist one beyond the other, like the various layers of an onion. On the other hand, others tell us that there are no such things as zones or spheres, but that heaven or hell are merely mental states, and that the various degrees of spiritual perfection represent the different zones. They do not occupy space, that is. They exist purely in the mind of the individual. Yet, perhaps, these two may be but two aspects of a single truth. It is only natural to suppose that those of similar interests would gravitate together just as they do in this life, and shun the society of others less evolved than themselves, unless they chose voluntarily to help them as occasion arose. This being the case, those more advanced spiritually would congregate in certain places, and those less advanced would gather together in other places, so that although the zones would not exist as physical spheres shut off from each other by physical barriers, as many believe, yet they exist practically, the barrier being a mental or spiritual one. Conditions and occupations in the spirit world. Spiritualism teaches that the next life is a busy one, that we continue our pursuits, activities, and interests, just as we do here, only under more favorable conditions. Evolution reigns supreme, just as it does in this world. This is only natural and rational, and what we should expect. It is a gradual continuation and process of advancement. The next world is said to be more or less a duplicate of this one. Those who are interested in learning may attend lectures or schools of instruction, may read, write, compose, paint, play, etc., just as they do here. The scenery is more or less similar to the scenery on this earth, although more beautiful and perfect in every respect. We are told that children never enter the lower spheres, nor are there any flowers in these spheres. They are found only in the higher spheres or more advanced stages. These spheres can influence one another more or less directly to a great extent, and particularly the higher spheres can exert a helpful influence on the lower ones. For this reason, progress is always possible for a spirit who desires it. He can secure assistance from those who are more advanced than he is in the spiritual world. His progress would, therefore, be rapid, and it all depends upon individual effort how rapid this will be. The sooner a spirit realizes his own possibilities and the fact that his own future happiness or unhappiness depends upon himself, the more rapidly will he advance. The spirit body. Spirits tell us that we inhabit in the next life a body similar to the material body, but representing the glow of youth in its strength and purity. The spirit of man is ever young, and that being so, it assumes that rejuvenated outward appearance upon entering the new life. This etheric body is incapable of fatigue and is fed by the magnetic and spiritual forces which surround it in that sphere. Children entering the new life gradually grow to maturity, though more rapidly than they do on this earth, because greater advantages are offered them, and progress is consequently swifter. At the age of greatest mental and spiritual maturity, they cease growing, and thenceforward remain in that perfected condition. On entering the spirit world. Upon entering the next life, the human spirit is met by friends or relatives who have before passed over and who are drawn by natural magnetic attraction and sympathetic interest to those who have just entered the spirit world. When the spirit enters the next life, it undergoes, in a way, a new birth, and is for some time bewildered. This is only natural after the shock and wrench of death. When we have had an accident in this life and have been knocked unconscious, the process of regaining consciousness is peculiar. When such a man opens his eyes, objects are presented to him vaguely, indistinctly. He would see men as trees walking. Sounds would be heard but faintly. There would be a vague jumble of noises, and no definite and articulate sounds would be recognized at first, until consciousness was more fully restored. Thoughts would be scattered, incoherent, and only the strongest stimuli would focus the attention on any definite object for longer than a few moments at a time. When a man dies, the departure of the soul from the body must be as great as a strain upon the surviving consciousness as any accident could be, especially in cases of sudden death, suicide, and in those cases where the patient is said to die hard. Of course, after a little time, the spirit survives the initial shock and soon becomes adjusted to the new environment and condition. And this fact would account for the bewilderment and confusion which many spirits seem to experience upon their entering into the next life. It is only natural and what we should expect. Sex in the spirit world. Many have asked whether the distinction of sex is maintained in the next life, whether man continues to be man and woman woman. Here again, many different opinions have been expressed by those who have passed over, but the majority seem to contend that the distinction between male and female is fundamental, mentally and spiritually no less than physically, and for this reason, they are destined to be more or less different for all time. This does not mean, as many think, that woman is there, as she is here too often, in a condition of subservience or inferiority. On the other hand, she is man's equal in many particulars, in some ways inferior to him, and in some ways superior. It is a question of differing viewpoints and constitution. Each may attain perfection and ultimate complete happiness in their own particular way, just as every individual here must obtain in his own way. As to the relations of the sexes in the next life, the teaching of the highest spirits is that there is love, harmony, sympathy, cooperation, and a mental and spiritual blending together of their natures, which corresponds to physical love on this plane. Earthbound spirits in the lowest plane are said to be unable to get away from the atmosphere and magnetic attraction of this earth, and do not care to, even if they could. They are the cause of much of the trouble which mediums experience, often causing obsession by delivering false or lying messages. There seems to be a law which permits spirits from the higher zones to descend into the lower zones, but the reverse of this does not take place. Thus, there are good or spiritual influences always playing upon the lower spheres from the higher spheres, and progress is thus rendered easy to those who care to take advantage of their opportunities. Where and how spirits live. Many of the descriptions which have been given to us indicate that spirits inhabit houses or mansions very similar to our own, and that the scenery of the spirit land is also similar to that of the earth plane, only more beautiful. Garments of variegated colors are said to be worn, as well as ornaments for those who care for them. The occupations of spirits are many and varied. Time is not spent in the spiritual spheres, as many imagine, in idleness or in religious devotions. How spirits talk. The spirit body, in the spirit heaven, is thus as material to them as our world, only it exists on a different plane of activity, and vibrates at a different rate of activity from ours. Hence, it is invisible to us, as we are usually invisible to them. And it requires clairvoyance on the part of spirits to perceive the material world, just as it does on the part of mortals to perceive the spiritual world. Conversation between spirits is carried on by a species of thought exchange or telepathy. Though the conversation appears perfectly natural and as though delivered by means of mouth, as it is with us, we can form some idea as to how natural this would be from our dreams when the exchange of thought is purely mental. Yet the words spoken to each other by the dream figures seem as natural and as sonorous as our usual conversation. Insanity and spirits. There are, strictly speaking, no insane spirits, it is said, except in the earth spheres, and these, previous to their insanity, were degraded spiritually and morally. They frequently continue in some degree insane for a long period of time, their spiritual condition not being favorable to their restoration, and here they are often attracted to mortals with like tendencies, whom they obsess and through whom they ventilate their own disordered fancies and even impel them to acts of violence. However, as much insanity is caused by disorders of the links between body and mind, and as these are all severed at the moment of death, the mind is usually normal and sound as soon as it enters the spirit world. and in any case, it recovers very rapidly upon its entrance into that realm. How spirits travel. Spirits are said to possess the ability to move from place to place with extreme rapidity, the fact as quick as thought, as the saying is. It is as easy for one to imagine oneself in China or in England as it is to imagine oneself in Brooklyn if one is living in New York. The one process takes no longer than the other, and as you are in the spirit world, where your thoughts and interests are, you may readily perceive that it takes you no longer to reach one place than it does another. However incredible this may seem at first sight, it is quite intelligible when we remember the rapidity with which wireless messages travel. Flying through space at the speed of light, 186,000 miles a second, this would carry these waves nearly 7.5 times around the world in 1 second. And it has been experimentally proven that these electric waves do travel at that rate. Such being the case, we can, at least, conceive that thought can travel at as quick a rate, however inconceivable it may appear to our reason. Good and evil spirits. We have heard much of obsessing and lying spirits, of evil spirits, and those who work harm, but we must remember that there are spirits of quite another character in the heavens, who are said to protect and guard us, give us wise counsel and advice, and are, in fact, veritable guardian angels. Their duty is to impress our minds and by this means to instruct and guide us, to instill good thoughts and resolves, admonish us of our faults, reprove us when we go astray, and assist in the development of special talents. They do not interfere directly in the physical world, but impress our minds, influencing them in this way or in that. The doctrine of correspondences. There is said to be a definite agreement or correspondence between the material and spiritual order of things. What we perceive as a tree in this world is only the outward manifestation of the real spiritual tree lying within it, and this is true of all physical manifestations and facts which we see in nature. Every physical body has a corresponding spiritual body behind it, and this fact gives rise to the famous doctrine of correspondences, elaborated by Swedenborg. This correspondence throws a little light on the bewildering fact that spirits often speak of spirit gold, spirit marble, spirit houses, spirit books, etc., as if they were tangible realities. Not, of course, that these are sublimations of corresponding objects of earth, existent throughout but different as to material, yet sufficiently alike to be called by the same name. In other words, these spirit objects are expressed in a different vehicle of the nature which is to us externalized as gold, marble, etc. We must endeavor to realize the reality of the spiritual world, which we have been unaccustomed to think of as in any way substantial owing to the teachings of theology. The difficulty of describing the spirit world. It is impossible to express things psychic adequately in direct language, for the simple reason that our words are images drawn from material things and their effects. Immaterial things and the life beyond must, therefore, generally be described by symbols rather than by words, and these symbols, whether seen in vision or representing themselves to the mind in the normal state, partake less of the seer's idiosyncrasies than any direct language would do. This symbolism is often carried to a high place in interpretation, so much so that the original is almost lost sight of. Of this, however, we shall speak at length of the chapter devoted to symbolism. There is much evidence to show that spirits can create forms and objects by the mere exercise of their volition. They build up what appear to be solid objects by the use of their minds, and these objects are often mistaken by the spirits for realities. Thus, thought forms may be created by a spirit intelligence, and this is a fact which many spiritualists have overlooked, though it is an important one, as I shall endeavor to show later. Darkness and light. Wrong and evil in some ways seem connected with darkness. Unhappy spirits always complain that they can find no light, but as they progress, the darkness seems to lift and light begins to dawn. This does not mean that they emerge from a material darkness into a material light, but go through a process of psychic evolution, which would, in their own minds, correspond to this. The quickest way for an unhappy spirit to progress towards the light is for it to help and comfort or assist another in like condition. Unfortunately, they are very often ignorant of this, but fortunately, many spiritualists have done a great deal of good in the seance room, etc., by giving this knowledge to spirits of a low order. Many of the spirits who have passed over, being nearer earth than heaven, soon after their transition are more easily reached by the living than by other spirits, so far as comfort and advice and assistance are concerned, and for this reason, prayers of the living are often of great help to those who have recently passed over and are extremely earthbound by reason of their mental and moral characteristics. Ordinary advice and assistance may also be given to these spirits at a seance. Visits to the spirit world. The spirit world can occasionally be visited, it is said, by the spirit of the sleeper or the somnambulist, and the deeper the sleep, the more separated from the body is the spirit until in deep trance. The spirit is sometimes entirely withdrawn. In deep sleep, also, the spirit occasionally goes on clairvoyant excursions and comes back to its normal body, remembering much that it has seen in the spiritual realms. In the state of ecstasy, these voyages are often made, and the seer will retain a certain amount of consciousness of this earth and be able to dictate to those about him his impressions while visiting the spiritual world, and while seeing more or less clearly what is happening there. Spirits are said to exercise free will, and have far more liberty of choice in the next world than they do here, where they are bound by habit and tradition, no less than by mental and physical obstructions and difficulties. The psychic gifts of spirits are far more highly developed than they were when on this earth, and they are frequently capable of exercising the faculty of foreknowledge or prevision, as well as other supernormal powers, such as telepathy, clairvoyance, and clairaudience. Infinite intelligence. They are also able to perceive the general plan of nature far more thoroughly and effectively than we, because they have, so to speak, a greater mental grasp of the universe in its entirety. And many spirits who have died while disbelieving in an infinite intelligence have, as time progressed, shown that they have more or less changed their viewpoint and now are more definitely religious than they were before. As Dr. Kroll says, I have constantly been impressed with the numerous proofs of the creative and sustaining power of deity, and step by step I have been led to undoubtingly believe that He, though not in human form, is everywhere present, the creator, preserver, and controller of all things, literally God, in the most comprehensive sense of the term, with whom all wisdom and power and infinite love extends to all His creatures. This is the effect of these investigations upon my mind, and I am disposed to believe that similar and more extended researches by others in the future will lead all true, earnest spiritualists to the same belief, and thus modern spiritualists will be stamped with the higher polity of true religion, with a correct, though necessarily limited, conception of God's character, and of His relations to us, and of ours to Him. Shall we see God? However this may be, it is claimed that spirits, for some time after transition, at least do not definitely know anything more about the nature or extent of this infinite intelligence than we do. They do not pass directly into the presence of any deity, as theology tells us. Questioned on this fact, they reply, "I do not know." However, as they progress in spiritual perception and understanding, they gradually perceive that the universe, instead of being a chaos due to chance, is orderly and systematic, and governed by a supreme or infinite intelligence, which is the guiding principle involved, and that it would only be logical to believe that such an intelligence necessarily existed. The spirit world, the source of energy. The spiritual world is the source of all energy. Even in this life, our energy is derived from some spiritual source. The nature of life is as yet unknown, and there is every indication that it is due to some spiritual influx acting upon and through the material world. One proof of this is that during the hours of sleep, when the body is resting and passive, the nervous or spiritual energy is revived. The body is recharged, as it were, in the same way as a storage battery might be recharged with electric energy. This process does not depend upon any material condition, for sleep can often revive us instantly, as many can attest. In moments of extreme exhaustion, the head may drop to the breast for a fraction of a second, and a moment later, consciousness be regained. Yet, in that moment of time, some complete spiritual revivification has taken place. The energy of the body seems to have been recharged or replenished, and new energy infused from some spiritual source in a manner which would be quite inexplicable, were we to depend upon the ordinary teachings of science to explain such facts. The phenomena and teachings of spiritualism alike constitute a great solace and comfort to many souls in distress and sorrow. The proof that death does not end all, and that the individual human spirit continues to exist as an entity and in precisely the same form as it is now, is a great comfort to the majority of persons. In this way, the teachings of spiritualism are a solace to those who accept them. To those who not only believe, but are enabled to obtain some of the varied phenomena, this assurance and consolation is doubly true. The different kinds of spiritual gifts. There are many spiritual gifts, as St. Paul says in his message to the Corinthians. He wrote, "Now there are diversities of gifts, but the same Spirit, and there are differences of administrations, but the same Lord, and there are diversities of operations, but it is the same God which worketh all in all. But the manifestation of the Spirit is given to every man to profit withal. For to one is given by the Spirit the word of wisdom, to another the word of knowledge by the same Spirit, to another faith by the same Spirit, to another the gift of healing by the same Spirit, to another the working of miracles, to another prophecy, to another discerning of spirits, to another diverse kinds of tongues, to another the interpretation of tongues. But all these worketh that one and the selfsame Spirit, dividing to every man severely as he will. 1 Corinthians chapter 12. How anyone can disbelieve in spirit communication on the ground that it is contrary to Bible teachings after the above passage, it is hard to comprehend, since here are a large number of spirit manifestations clearly outlined and stated by the Apostle to be manifestations of the Divine Spirit. End of chapter 5, recorded by Cynthia Sheeler. Website cynthiasheeler.icanvoice.com.
Chapter 6 of Your Psychic Powers and How to Develop Them. Recording by Lisa Phelps Gonzalez. Chapter 6. The Health of Mediums and Psychics. The health, bodily, mentally, and spiritually, of mediums is a very important factor in all mediumistic and psychic development, far more so than is usually realized. In the first place, we have a certain amount of bodily energy in order to accomplish anything we desire in life, and this energy comes largely from physical health. Mediums have found to their cost that the production of phenomena, especially of the physical order, is at times a very exhausting process, and unless they keep themselves in good bodily health, they discover that they become run down and nervously exhausted, in which case they render themselves subject to insomnia, depressing mental emotions, and if this gets worse, to obsession and even greater dangers and difficulties. It is very important, therefore, for all mediums to keep up their physical health. A healthy brain. The mind of man depends largely upon the condition of his brain, and if this is not rested, freshened, and supplied in abundance with rich, healthy blood, his mental life suffers in consequence, for we know that any poisonous substance, mixed with the blood, immediately affects the mind by circulating through the delicate substance of the brain. The tiny nerve cells all over the body, which are the storehouses of energy, may be compared to a number of tiny cups, which we fill with energy every night during sleep and more or less empty every day. Our duty is to keep these little cups brimful, and if we allow them to become too emptied, so that nothing is left, we run into danger of nervous exhaustion, neurasthenia, etc. The first thing which the medium must pay attention to is, therefore, the state of his physical health, and the following rules will be found helpful by all those who wish to attain this condition. Deep breathing exercises. In the first place, a certain number of deep breathing exercises should be taken every day. These serve to keep the lungs active and to massage the internal organs. But deep breathing exercises have a more potent and far-reaching effect than this. There is a peculiar life-giving property in fresh air, and if we do not breathe this fully, we never live as completely and receive as large a supply of the vital and magnetic currents of the universe as we otherwise would. If any one doubts this, he has but to stand erect and take half a dozen deep breathing exercises as directed below, and he will feel energized from top to toe. The way to take these breathing exercises so as to get the best results is as follows. 1. How to breathe. Stand before an open window or out of doors, free from all restrictive clothing. Before beginning, exhale forcibly, bending the body forward and relaxing the muscles. Place both open hands over the abdomen. Now breathe as deeply as possible against these hands, expanding the abdomen as much as possible without allowing the chest or ribs to expand in the least. In other words, breathe with abdomen only. After you have done this 5 or 6 times, place both your hands against your ribs on either side. Now breathe in deeply, pressing out the ribs, but without allowing either the abdomen or the upper chest to expand. After you have done this 5 or 6 times, place your hands on the upper chest, just below the neck, and breathe with this portion of the lungs, without allowing either the ribs or the abdomen to expand. At first you will find it very difficult to control your breathing, limiting it to these parts of the lungs, but this will come with practice, and it will be shown later in Chapter 41 how important these breathing exercises are when the psychic side of the breathing exercises is understood. The Psychic Complete Breath. After you have mastered these 3 separate steps, you will be enabled to take what is known as a complete breath. That is, one which expands first the abdomen, then the ribs, then the upper chest. You should by this time have such control over your breathing that you are enabled to do this in 3 distinct stages, or merge them together into one as you wish. In all these breathing exercises, the back of the nasal passage should be relaxed, and you should breathe through the nose, never the mouth, as though you were smelling a flower. If you do this and relax inwardly, you will find that the air strikes the back of the throat before it is felt at all, and you will never notice the air in the nose itself. Practice this every day until you become proficient. The best way to ensure this is to close the lips while keeping the teeth separated, then throw down the under portion of the jaw. Developing exercises. 2. A certain amount of exercise should be taken each day. The particular character of exercise, which will be found beneficial for the maintenance of health, also for development of psychic and mediumistic gifts, are those which develop the vitality of the inner organs about the waistline. Bending exercises of all kinds are especially useful. Large muscles are not required for good health, but energy and endurance are. The following 4 exercises will be found very helpful in this connection. A. Stand erect, raising both arms over the head as far as possible. Raise yourself on your toes and, at the same time, stretch upwards with the fingertips as far as you can, as though trying to lengthen yourself. B. Stand as before, arms raised over the head. Now bend forward and try to touch the floor with your fingertips without bending the knees. Again, raise yourself up to a standing position very rapidly. This is a well-known but very useful exercise. C. Stand as in exercise B and bend the body sideways from the waist as far as possible, first to the left, then to the right. Make this motion as rapid as you can. D. Stand as before and bend slowly, trying to touch the floor with the fingers. As you do this, take in a deep breath. The purpose of this exercise is to compress the liver from above and below at the same time, and this massage will prove very helpful. Health hints. Other points to be observed in maintaining good health are the following. 1. Eat as little red meat as you can, since this is acknowledged by all to retard psychic development. 2. Eat a certain amount of fruit every day, not in addition to other food, but in place of it. Acid fruits are particularly beneficial in nearly all cases. 3. Drink at least a quart of water each day. 4. Accustom the body to cool baths. It is best to begin these in the summertime and continue them in the winter. 5. Wear as little clothing as you can, consistent with warmth. The skin breathes as well as the lungs, and free circulation of air on the surface is essential. The powers of the mind. We now come to the mental factor. Few realize how important this is in the development of psychic gifts. If the mind be depressed, worried, scattered, and unable to concentrate upon any definite thing, good results can hardly be hoped for in any way of psychic development. Many psychics can obtain good results for individual sitters, but as soon as they make a public appearance they fail more or less completely. We can hardly doubt that the reason for this is their apprehension for the results, fear they will not succeed, etc. This prevents all free communication. It shuts the doors of the soul, as it were, against any outside influences. In order to be receptive and sensitive, we must have a free mind and give ourselves up wholly to those forces and vibrations which play upon us. If you watch yourself, you will find that your body tends to contract all over as soon as you think certain thoughts, or experience certain emotions, such as jealousy, hatred, envy, etc. On the other hand, as soon as you send out thoughts of friendship, love, sympathy, etc., you find that your whole being expands and relaxes. If this is true of the muscles of the body, how much more true it is of the muscles of the soul, if I may so express it. The imagination, it has been said, is the lungs of the spiritual life, and in order to have free play they must be unrestricted, just as our physical lungs are. The essence of psychic development is this complete surrender and quiescence, and until this is ensured, full development can hardly be expected. There is such a thing as spiritual contraction. We have all heard of the man with the ingrowing conscience. This means simply that this man is dwarfed, contracted, and unsympathetic in his attitude to all that he meets. Gentleness and cheerfulness, said Robert Louis Stevenson, are the perfect duties, and we cannot do better than advise the medium to follow this motto in his daily life. Psychic contagion. These influences which are harmful in ourselves are harmful when experienced in others, and they are contagious to a remarkable degree. All experienced spiritualists know that a medium is liable to take on the conditions of a spirit or of another person when in a sensitive state, and this is true of his mental and spiritual life as well as his physical health. We can acquire the other's irritable disposition, his sourness and lack of balance, for the time being, just as easily as we can acquire other symptoms. And unless this is recognized, and the medium takes care to throw off these influences, they are liable to remain with him more or less and influence him, just as we sometimes experience the after influence of a bad dream in the daytime. How to choose a good developing medium. The practical conclusion to be drawn from all this is that it is very dangerous to the mental and moral health of a psychic to develop under the guidance of a medium who is mentally, morally, physically, or spiritually ill. For these conditions will possibly sooner or later be taken on, and they are liable to influence the medium to his own detriment. Be most careful, therefore, in selecting the psychic under whom you develop, for your own future progress and happiness will depend largely upon that. End of Chapter 6. Recording by Lisa Phelps Gonzalez, Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Chapter 7. Know thyself was the mandate of the Delphic oracle. Before man can undertake to govern and control external forces, he must learn to control those within himself, for only by doing this can success be attained. Man utilizes his mind as he would a tool every day of his life. The better we understand our tools, the better workmen we are. Hence, he who would succeed must understand the workings of his own nature. The cosmic currents. First of all, we are told that there are cosmic currents playing to and fro in the world, contradictory currents or streams of thought into which we are liable to enter unconsciously, even against our will. Some of these currents are beneficial, others are harmful. Some natures are strong to stem the tide and achieve success against the greatest obstacles. Others can extricate themselves, but partially. Others do not do so at all. For this reason, we have the successes and the failures in life. It depends partly upon outside influences, partly upon ourselves. The first we cannot control, except indirectly through ourselves. How to make a success of your life. Here is the explanation of a great fallacy which many people make. They imagine that they can be their own will mold circumstance to suit themselves. This is only partly true. Let me explain. We must not turn our power of mind upon others. We must turn it upon ourselves in such a way that it will make us stronger, more positive, more capable, and more efficient. And as we develop in this manner, success will come of itself. The way to control circumstances is to control the forces within yourself, to make a greater man of yourself. And as you become greater and more competent, you will naturally gravitate into better circumstances. We should remember that like attracts like. For, as Dr. Larson says, those people who fail and who continue to fail all along the line fail because the power of their minds is either in a habitual negative side or is always misdirected. If the power of mind is not working positively and constructively for a certain goal, you are not going to succeed. If your mind is not positive, it is negative, and negative minds float with the stream. We must remember that we are in the midst of all kinds of circumstances, some of which are for us and some of which are against us. And we will either have to make our own way or drift, and if we drift, we go wherever the stream goes. But most of the streams of human life are found to flow into the world of the ordinary and the inferior. Therefore, if you drift, you will drift with the inferior, and your goal will be failure. The three laws of success. In order to achieve mental and spiritual success, three rules must be observed which are of prime importance. The first is that you must have in your mind a clear conception of what you want. If you have not any definite goal in view, you cannot expect to achieve any great success, because you will be constantly wasting your energy in byways, without directing it all towards one certain point. The second is, you must make your thinking positive and not negative. This does not mean that you must grind your teeth, frown, and try to dominate everyone you meet. It means that you possess a calm self-assurance and the inner conviction and the certainty that you will succeed. Physically, this state of things may be felt in a full, firm sensation throughout the nervous system. The third rule is, all your thinking must be constructive, that is, built about the goal or object you have in mind. If you spend only a fraction of your energy of thought in any one direction, you cannot expect to progress very far in that line. The runner who tries at the same time to work out a mathematical problem in his head will not be first in the race. Constructive thinking means that you must consistently and continually think of and about what you wish to accomplish. The sooner you learn to do this, the sooner will success be yours. Obstacles in life present great difficulties. Up to a certain point, they may be looked upon as helps to character and progress. And the more these are overcome, the stronger will your character ultimately be. At the same time, this may be overdone, and there is such a thing as kicking against the pricks. Flowing with the tide. If you're striving your best, and every man knows in his heart when he is doing his best, to accomplish a certain thing, and more difficulties seem to multiply the further you progress, you may, under certain conditions, assume that it is not meant for you at this particular time to do this particular thing, and you may shortly look back and see how you were prevented from undertaking something that might have proven disastrous. In this way it is possible to float with these currents instead of stemming them to advantage. Mrs. Towne tells us that she, at one period of her life, could do nothing on account of her desire to rest and sleep. She determined that she would give this full play. She went to bed and stayed there for 14 days and nights. At the end of that time she felt that at last she had had enough rest, and thenceforward work became a joy instead of a burden. It proved to be the turning point in her life. Acting for our ultimate good. There are, therefore, cosmic currents swaying to and fro, flowing back and forth throughout the psychic universe. And the more we can sense or become receptive to these currents, the more will our life be guided and directed for us by an intelligent control, greater than our own. We all think that we know exactly what we want to do and what is best for us. Yet this is not always the case. To a mind vaster and more inclusive than ours, the more opposite of this may seem better for our ultimate good. For example, a dog has to have a tooth extracted. The painful operation of removing the tooth is all that the dog can see. To him it is all painful, nothing beneficial. To us, on the contrary, who see not only what a dog sees, but more, it is clear that the dog will eventually be better for the removal of his tooth, though it is a painful experience. Applied to ourselves, it is most probably true that our painful experiences in life can be interpreted in a similar manner, and that many of them, could we see them in that light, for our ultimate good. How these laws apply to psychic development. Now let us apply what we have learned to psychic development and the cultivation of mediumistic gifts. We have found that there are magnetic and spiritual forces playing upon us from different directions here and there all over the world. Some of these are for our own good, others are not. We must learn to become sensitive to these currents which are beneficial to us, and shut out those which are not. How are we to do this? In the first place, it is necessary for the student who really desires to obtain this guidance to make certain renunciations or sacrifices. He cannot be in the world and at the same time receive the spiritual perfection. One cannot both eat one's cake and have it. So you must make up your mind just what you wish to do. Many mediums, unfortunately, do not develop along these lines. The cultivation of the spiritual self is not altogether the same thing as the cultivation of the psychic self, obtaining psychic phenomena. The one great reproach which has been made against many mediums and spiritualists is that spiritualists are everything but spiritual. Doubtless, this is not true of spiritualists any more than the followers of any other religious faith. Human nature is weak, and we all fall from grace. But we are now only talking of those who sincerely desire personal spiritual enlightenment, and who are willing to make some sacrifices in order to obtain it. To those who are anxious to follow this path, we would say that it is unwise to give too full directions thus early in your development. This is a question which will be discussed more fully in chapter 42. For the present, a few practical points may be helpful both in your daily life and your psychic unfoldment. Rules to follow. As is so often insisted upon, the health must be maintained. If this is not done, you render yourself liable to nervous exhaustion and, through this, to obsession. Your clear common sense and interest in the things of the world must, to a certain extent, be kept. Otherwise, the judgment will become unbalanced. Cultivate sympathy, harmony, interest in your fellow beings. Cultivate your own sensitiveness along ordinary psychic lines by various special exercises. When you obtain a certain number of psychic phenomena in this way, you will be far more receptive than you were before. Cultivate at all times what may be called a listening attitude of the soul. This is particularly important and practically valuable. When you are in doubt upon any question, retire to a quiet room and ask your own higher self what is the best thing for you to do. At first, these replies will be very vague and indistinct, but as you progress in your development, you will find that they will become clearer and clearer, and you will soon get definite and clearly formed replies in answer to this mental questioning. As soon as you have progressed thus far, you may be sure that you have begun to sense the cosmic currents which flow about you. And when once you have done this, it is thenceforward only a matter of personal development. This will be dealt with more fully in several of the chapters which follow. End of chapter 7.
Chapter 8 of Your Psychic Powers and How to Develop Them. Recording by Nancy Beard. Chapter 8. The Cultivation of Spiritual Gifts. There are two ways of regarding any particular fact. The first is to observe it from without. The second is to experience it from within. If we look at an orange, we observe it from without, and we could never experience it from within unless we were the orange. The only things that can experience sensations from within in this way are minds. Each mind can inwardly experience and see objectively its own sensations, and, as so far as we know, it is the only thing in the world which can do so. All psychic experience is, therefore, inward or sensitive, and can never be felt by another person, but must be experienced by him in order that he should appreciate and understand the mental state you yourself are experiencing. It is the same with psychic phenomena. If anyone experiences any phenomena of this character, he can never impart this knowledge to others except in a very roundabout way, and for these others to understand the phenomena they themselves must experience them. It is for this reason that it is so difficult for psychics to express and explain to outsiders the character of the sensations and phenomena they are experiencing. Everything being so largely symbolic, and our language being so poor in this direction, it is often very difficult for them to explain precisely what they mean. Developing mediumship. We do not know as yet exactly what mediumship is. There is much evidence to show that it is very often hereditary, and runs through 3 or 4 generations, just like any other gift. With some, mediumship appears in childhood, and seems to be a very part of their constitution. The majority, however, develop it later on in life, as the result of coming into contact with mediums, or developing it within themselves by experiments. Some retain their mediumship throughout life. Others experience it only for a few months, a few weeks, a few days. In some cases, only a few seconds. In some cases, mediumship is terminated suddenly. In other cases, it is gradually lost through a period of years. One who has at any time experienced mediumship can usually recall it by reason of its persistence, no matter how long afterwards. Controlling phenomena. In mediumship, or when obtaining psychic phenomena of any character, we are as yet experimenting, as it were, with forces and laws as yet largely unknown, just as the early scientists experimented with electricity. Indeed, we do not yet know what electricity is. However, at the present day we can control it perfectly, and it is to be hoped that the time will come when mediumship and all psychic phenomena can be controlled in a similar manner, even though we may never know the innermost essence of psychic power. If we could do that, it would be, at any rate, on a workable basis, so to speak. Mediumistic exercises. All mediumistic exercises develop this power to some extent, but in different directions. The following are a few of the methods which may be pursued in cultivating and developing the psychic self and the inner spiritual center of our being, as distinct from purely physical phenomena. As before said, it is essential that we should understand and control ourselves before we endeavor to control outside forces. Much may be learned through what is known as introspection, that is, the turning inward of the attention upon the inner self, instead of outward upon the external world. If you close your eyes and do this, and try to find out the nature of your true inner being, you will probably experience a peculiar sensation. You will find that, like happiness, it continually eludes you, and that when you think you have grasped your own self, it is only a state of mind which has since passed and is now only a memory. Practice this introspection for a few minutes each day, and before long you will be surprised at your development in this direction, for you will be enabled to come into far closer touch with yourself than formerly. The inner self will become illuminated, as it were. Mastering the self. This practice will lead to the habit of escaping from our sense perceptions, to which most of us are slaves. As you get away from these, and are enabled to withdraw more and more fully into your inner self, you will experience a sensation of reality, and the ability to perceive the truth of things in a manner hitherto undreamed of. Truth exists. We do not perceive it for the simple reason that the veil of sense is between it and us. Lift this veil, and you will perceive truth clearly, as in the light of day. This practice of acquiring greater mastery over self will also put you more closely in touch with the great magnetic power currents of the universe, so that you will never feel exhausted or in need of nervous energy. There being an unlimited supply of energy in this universe, all we have to do is to learn to tap it, which we can do by these methods of psychic development, and we can draw upon it in any quantity we choose. We will also be put in touch with higher conditions. How spirit unites us. With increased spiritual development and spiritual life, we will perceive that there is a universal brotherhood of mankind, and that nothing is really separated from anything else. That we are not separated from our neighbor, but that we are united in the great universal infinite intelligence which combines all. We may compare ourselves to trees in this respect. Each tree is apparently a separate being, whose leaves whisper to one another, and whose branches sometimes touch in the swaying of the evening breezes. But their roots are sunk deep into the ground, and are often intertwined with another, while the common earth unites them all. In a similar way, we are united in the spiritual universe of which we form a part. Fundamentally, physically, we are united one with another. Meditation. Meditation may be considered one of the methods by means of which we awaken the inner self, and frequently awaken our spiritual or astral senses, so as to cause them to function on another plane. At the same time, if this developing process is done properly, we build up walls of power about ourselves, which others will find it impossible to break through, by mental or hypnotic influence, even should they desire to do so. We cover ourselves with a sphere of energy through which nothing can pass against our will. The power of thought. All thoughts sent out by us into the universe have some definite purpose and have a certain effect, both upon ourselves and upon others. Thoughts are things. We can create a thought as surely as we can create a house or a chair. And, once created, there is no telling where this thought may stop, or how lasting its actions may be. If these thoughts are good, helpful, and useful, they often return to us like boomerangs, with the added happiness and power which they have accumulated from others of a similar character in their flight through space. On the contrary, evil thoughts come back to us in the same way, and it will be found that they always return to their sender, with added power for evil or for good. See to it, therefore, that you only send out thoughts of the highest and best. Some people, when they first realize this fact, are almost afraid at first to think at all, for fear of the effects their thoughts may have. But this is a great mistake. Expression is the first law of life. We must learn to express. Express. The chief outward difference between a living being and a corpse is that one can express itself and the other cannot. Do not be afraid to express yourself fully and forcibly in any direction. Even the bodily expression of our feelings and emotions is quite justified. There is nothing to be ashamed of in conviction or in passion. It is the abuse of these which is detrimental. The use of the will. In a similar way, the power of the will may be used for good or for evil, as the case may be, and it has a great power in both directions, as the history of occultism has shown us. In the one case we have, as the result of the exercise of this power, various psychic phenomena, marvelous cures, and all the varied accomplishments of this world. On the other hand, we have the phenomena of witchcraft, black magic, harmful absent treatment, and crime. It all depends into which channel we direct the energy of our will. The soul must learn to find and experience itself fully before it can consider itself thoroughly alive and a fully developed entity. After this realization has been accomplished, then only should we direct our attention to cultivating and directing the latent energies which we possess. Self-development essential. It is because of this fact that self and soul culture is necessary before psychic phenomena are cultivated to any great extent. We must learn to know ourselves, to preserve a just and careful balance of judgment, sympathy, understanding, and intuition. If we do not possess these qualities, we shall never become mediums on the highest plane. On the contrary, We may draw to ourselves, while developing mediumship, harmful or lying intelligences which we have attracted into our magnetic aura. So, I cannot too strongly advise and warn you to practice these self-developing exercises before cultivating external psychic or mediumistic powers. Mediumship opens the doors to influence and powers over which we have little control, and we must be sure that, before the doors of the soul are swung back, we must be prepared to receive whoever enters, by reason of our own self-control and inner powers. Otherwise, we may be unable to close the doors when we wish to, or the door of reason may become altogether unhinged. In giving these warnings, I do not wish to frighten the reader, since there is no necessity to become alarmed if caution be exercised in this development. Only I wish to emphasize the necessity for this caution. End of Chapter 8. Recording by Nancy Beard, Kingston, New York.
Chapter 9 of Your Psychic Powers and How to Develop Them. Recording by Jeannie Hall. Chapter 9. Psychometry. What is psychometry? Dr. J. Rhodes Buchanan says, "The word psychometry, coined in 1842 to express the character of a new science and art, is the most pregnant and important word that has been added to the English language, coined from the Greek psyche, soul, and metron, measure. It literally signifies soul measuring. In our modern use of the word, however, it means something a little different from this. A psychic who picks up an object and in connection with it gets certain psychic impressions is said to psychometrize the object, and this process is known as psychometry. Experiments. The famous Professor Denton, a mineralogist, whose wife possessed remarkable powers in this direction, conducted a number of experiments, some of which are described as follows. He gave his wife a specimen from the Carboniferous Formation. Closing her eyes, she described swamps and trees with their tufted heads and scaly trunks, with the great frog-like animals that existed in that age. He got a specimen of the lava that flowed from the volcano in Hawaii in 1848. His sister, by its means, described a boiling ocean, a cataract of golden lava that almost equaled Niagara in size. A small fragment of a meteorite that fell at Painesville, Ohio, was given to his wife's mother, a sensitive who did not then believe in psychometry. This is what she said. "I seem to be traveling away through nothing right forward. I see what looks like stars and mist. I seem to be taken right up. The other specimens take me down." His wife independently gave a similar description, but saw it revolving and its tail of sparks. Not due to telepathy. Professor Denton took steps to prove that this was not mind reading by wrapping the specimens in paper, shaking them up in a hat, and allowing the sensitive to pick out one and describe it, without anyone knowing which one it was. Among them was a fragment of brick from ancient Rome, antimony from Borneo, silver from Mexico, basalt from Fingal's Cave. Each place was described correctly by the sensitive in the most minute detail. These are but examples which could be multiplied, did space permit. Nearly everyone possesses a certain amount of power in this direction, and it only needs cultivation to bring it to light. Before proceeding to the practical side of this question, a few words of explanation of the theory involved will doubtless be of interest to the student. The explanation. It has been said that every object possesses its own peculiar psychic influence, fluid or aura, which may be recognized by one sensitive enough to perceive it. Human beings may transfer a certain amount of this fluid to objects, leaving them impressed with their influence. We see this in the case of magnetic cures, and in some cases of haunted houses. In fact, as we shall see in Chapter 28, devoted to that subject, This is one of the theories which has been advanced to explain haunted houses. Objects which have been worn close to the skin, or which have been brought into contact for a long time with the magnetism of any particular person, seem to retain a large share of this aura, and such objects may readily be psychometrized. Their aura may be read and interpreted according to the ability of the psychic. We often see demonstrations of this character given in public. Again, trance mediums are very sensitive to influences of this character, and if we place an object which has belonged to some person who has recently passed over into the hands of a good trance medium, he will frequently be enabled to get into contact with that person through the magnetism of the article in question, and in that way information may be obtained which otherwise could not have been secured. How to preserve the influence. Articles of this character often lose their properties, their virtue we might almost express it, by being left around or exposed to the handling of others. And for this reason it is best to keep such articles carefully wrapped up in thin rubber cloth which may be procured from any drugstore. In this way their properties are preserved. Just what this influence is with which the articles become impregnated, we are unable to say. Probably it is a form of the vital force which animates the universe. Yet, even supposing that this could flow into the object, and that the psychic could sense it, we have yet to explain why it should be that this particular vital energy should be enabled to arouse within the psychic the flood of information he receives. Akashic records. Professor Draper has said, "A shadow never falls upon a wall without leaving thereon a permanent trace, a trace made visible by resorting to proper processes. On the walls of private apartments, where we think the eye of intrusion is altogether shut out, and our retirement can never be profaned, there exist the records of our acts, silhouettes of whatever we have done. It is a crushing thought to whoever has committed secret crime, that the picture of his deed and the very echo of his words may be seen and heard countless years after he has gone the way of all flesh. There are certain analogies for this in the physical world. If sunlight falls upon a sheet of paper, and we place upon it a key, the outline of this key will be marked upon the paper, and may be recovered years later, by suitable means. If thoughts are things, they doubtless impress our surroundings in much the same way, and the objects which we psychometrize are influenced by means of our thoughts, and the human aura or fluid, so that they retain them within it, and may be read back by the sensitive. The interpretation of impressions received. In all psychometry, we must remember that the interpretation of the impressions received is largely symbolic, just as the printed word of a book is symbolic of the thought of the author lying behind it. So impressions stored within objects and sensed by the psychic must also be symbolic, and must be suitably interpreted by the psychometrist. Thus, when he places a geological specimen on his forehead, and describes an antediluvian monster, roaring and walking about, no one but a very shallow individual would imagine for a moment that the psychometrist was actually seeing the original. He simply got an impression of that era of the world's history, and symbolized it subconsciously in the form of this roaring monster. In obtaining impressions from an object, we must endeavor to become as receptive and sensitive as possible. A few preliminary exercises will enable you to do this to much better advantage than you otherwise would be enabled to. Exercises for developing sensitiveness. 1. Cultivate the sensitiveness of your fingertips. You may do this effectively by placing in a bowl water of the same temperature as the body. Now close your eyes and place your fingertips just above the surface of the water. Without looking, very gradually lower the fingertips until they come into contact with the water. See whether you can tell when this is the case. You will be surprised to discover that at first you are quite unable to tell when you have touched the water. 2. Another good exercise is to take a pair of compasses and, opening them 1/4 of an inch or so, touch the fingertips with the 2 sharp points, the eyes being closed. See if you can tell how far apart these points are, before looking at the compasses. In this way your fingers will acquire a sensitiveness of their own. 3. Learn to act upon first impressions. Do not hesitate or be afraid to express exactly how you feel and the impression that comes to you, no matter how ridiculous it may be. There is a useful saying which may help you in this respect. It is, "The first thought is the spirit's, the second is your own." So learn to act on first impressions and put into execution immediately anything which comes to you. 4. Analyze your own sensations and emotions as best you can after the first impression has been received, and see what you feel or experience within yourself. Then express this in words to the best of your ability. These emotions often express, in that form, facts which could not well be expressed in any other way, though they apparently have no connection with the object. For example, if you are feeling a watch, and you get in connection with that watch the feeling of depression and pain in the throat, state this fully, since the person who owned the watch may have strangled himself in a fit of melancholy. In this way, the emotions you perceive are fully in accord with the sensations which you receive from the object. Its practical value in daily life. The practice of psychometry will often enable you to tell the characteristics of another living person, and by this means you will be enabled to tell whether or not you will like such a person, because you may be attracted or repelled by the psychic impressions you receive in connection with the object such a person has been wearing. In practical life, information of this character is at times very useful. In addition to all this, the cultivation of psychometry is often useful in paving the way for the cultivation of other psychic phenomena, and will prove a useful introduction to them. End of Chapter 9. Recording by Jeannie Hall, Eldersburg, Maryland.
Chapter 10 of Your Psychic Powers and How to Develop Them. Recording by Catherine Louise. Chapter 10. The Human Aura. Surrounding every living body, and some non-living materials, there is a halo or aura, which may be seen under certain exceptional conditions. Clairvoyants have always contended that they could see this aura surrounding human beings, but they were laughed at for their pains by the majority of scientists, who continued to disbelieve in its existence. About the middle of the 19th century, Baron von Richtenbach published a book on the aura, paying particular attention to the emanations which his sensitives had seen coming from crystals and the poles of horseshoe magnets. It is now known that both magnets and crystals give off a very noticeable aura, and this may be seen by anyone possessing even moderate psychic development, if they observe these objects when placed in a darkened room. How studied by the aid of chemical screens. Needless to say, all this was disbelieved at the time, and it was not until 1911 that the existence of the aura was proved scientifically by means of mechanical and chemical means. Dr. Kilner, the electrician of St. Thomas Hospital, London, then showed that it is possible for anyone to see the aura issuing from a living human being by means of especially prepared glass slides containing a chemical named dicyanin. The subject of the experiment is placed against a white or black cloth background in a nearly darkened room, and must be at least partially nude, as the aura cannot be seen through the clothing. The investigator then looks through one of the chemical screens at the daylight. Then, closing his eyes, pulls down the blind so as to make the room nearly dark. In this light, the figure of the model can be seen only faintly, and if the subject is looked at through the glass screen, the aura may be seen by nearly anyone possessing good eyesight. In this case, the investigator does not have to be a clairvoyant, since the eyes are rendered susceptible to certain artificial light waves by means of the chemical screens. Usually our eyes cannot perceive these waves. In this way, the skeptical world has been convinced of the reality of the human aura, and it is now considered a proved scientific fact. The three auras thus disclosed. The human aura or atmosphere consists of a number of layers or strata, one beyond the other, extending out into space. By means of Dr. Kilner's chemical screens, three of these divisions may be clearly perceived. First, what is called the etheric double. This is seen like a dark line, slightly grayish in color, which extends over the whole surface of the body, conforming exactly to its shape. Doubtless, this is one manifestation of the double or etheric body. Beyond this extends the inner aura, which is usually 2 or 3 inches broad. It conforms to the contour of the body throughout, and is more or less colored by the health of the individual and by the mental or emotional states which may be present at that time. Beyond this again is the outer aura, beginning where the inner aura ceases and extending from 3 to 6 inches as a rule before it becomes invisible. It extends slightly further in the case of women than it does in men. This aura is very variable and is greatly influenced by all the mental and psychic conditions of the person to whom it belongs. Its colors vary also very greatly, but this cannot as a rule be seen through the screens because they themselves are either dark red or blue. It takes a trained clairvoyant to see all the subtle gradations and variations of color in the aura. How to train your psychic sight. The best way to train yourself to see auras of this character is perhaps the following. 1. In a darkened room, study the aspect of a good horseshoe magnet, either suspended in the air by a silk thread or placed on a support with poles up, and vary the position of the observation until a faint luminosity is observed at the poles and along the edges of the magnet. 2. In the light, repeat the same process, trying to make out these lines and the extensions and limitations of the aura. It must be understood that this vision can be obtained artificially only through the action of the will, and by a proper focusing of the eyes, the perception of auras requiring a very different focus from ordinary sight, and this focusing is very often, nearly always in fact, different in each of the 2 eyes. The attempted focusing of the sight must therefore be made with each eye separately and then with both combined. It may happen that one eye only can be focused for this special vision, or when both are found available, if both focuses are not identical, the active use of both eyes at one time may destroy the psychic sight of the sensitive eye. The aura in daylight and darkness. It is important to master the faculty of seeing the magnetic aura in the daylight, because more complete details can thus be eventually obtained than in the dark, and this is the only way to learn how to perceive the human aura. For the purpose of trying one's vision in broad daylight, take a good horseshoe magnet and hold it perpendicularly in front of you, either against the background of an open outside light, such as can be obtained from looking out from the inside of a room through an open window, or against a near inside background, for instance a white or dark wall, according to the nature of the light. Then look at the edge of the magnet with one eye only, and gradually approach it or slide it away from you, until you obtain the best focus of vision. Look steadily along the same point, until it dawns on you that a kind of a quivering narrow band of mist or vapor is flowing from the metal and prevents your sight from freely perceiving the object back of it, producing in fact a sort of bending of your visual rays. As soon as you realize the presence on the edge of the magnet of this current of vaporous mist, which may be compared to the appearance of the heated air which arises in summertime from hot fields, the first psychic visual victory has been obtained, and the perception of the other phenomena connected with the aura will only need time, perseverance, and practice. And once the magnet is conquered, one may expect to speedily obtain the sight of the beautiful and intricate currents on the human body. The structure of the aura. After the aura has been perceived and its general layers distinguished, the student must turn his attention to its structure and color variations. The question of color will be treated in the next chapter, which is devoted entirely to that subject. As to the structure or composition of the aura, if this be studied carefully, it will be found that it is composed in a great variety of different ways, according to the object or person emitting it. Thus, the aura of flowers is very different to that of magnets or human beings. The aura of flowers. It is a very interesting study to try and perceive psychically the composition of the aura of various flowers. For instance, that of the violet is about 1/8 of an inch in thickness, and composed first of a bright light, then a line of dark blue, shading away into a very light blue, all these following the contour of the edge of the leaf. Above these lines is a scalloped or semi-linear string or border of 2 rows of little purplish red figures, diamond-shaped, very regularly distributed, so as to form 2 sets of 14 little diamonds over the space of each small lobe of the leaf. Then, above these, a wave of dark blue mist in crescent form, shading off into light blue. This is only a sample reading of one flower. Each flower has its own particular aura, some of them being very complex, but it will serve to show the student how interesting a study this can be made. The study of the aura of plants alone, carefully undertaken, would occupy considerable time. The human aura and how to study it. After you have studied the auras of magnets and plants in this way, you should turn your attention to the auras of living human beings. Children may easily be studied, and their auras are exceedingly interesting. Developed clairvoyants are enabled to see several different auras, each of them being composed of a number of subdivisions, and each subdivision having a different structure and color. It is a good plan to begin the study of the aura by the aid of the chemical screens, before mentioned, in semi-darkness, and then to practice viewing the aura without the screens, and, as the eyes gain sensitiveness, to admit more and more light, until it can be clearly seen in the daylight. In this way your psychic sight will be gradually and naturally developed. End of Chapter 10. Recording by Catherine Louise.
Chapter 11 of Your Psychic Powers and How to Develop Them. Recording by Libby Gahn. Chapter 11. Color and its Interpretation. In the last chapter we learned that there is a psychic atmosphere or aura surrounding each animate object, and particularly human beings, and that both the structure and the color of this varies greatly. We must now inquire first into the nature of these colorings, and secondly try to solve the question, what do they mean? How are we to interpret these colors, realizing that they are but symbols of something which they merely express? The color of every individual is doubtless somewhat different, and with the same individual it differs at various times, according to his state of health, the mental and psychical changes, etc. The majority of highly developed clairvoyants agree, however, with C.W. Leadbeater that the following colors may be distinguished, and that they signify the existing physical, mental, and spiritual conditions as follows. The meaning of various colors. Black indicates hatred and malice. Anger and hate thought forms are like heavy smoke. Red. Deep red flashes on black ground show anger. Lurid red indicates sensuality. Brown. Dull brown red shows avarice. Dull hard brown gray selfishness. Greenish brown, with red or scarlet flashes, denotes jealousy. Gray. Heavy leaden shows deep depression. Livid gray shows fear. Crimson indicates love. Orange, pride or ambition. Yellow shows intellectuality. Duller tints show it is used for selfish purposes. Green. Deep blue-green shows good qualities, deep sympathy, while gray-green shows deceit and cunning. Blue. Dark indicates religious feeling. Light blue shows devotion to a noble spiritual ideal. White or near white shows high spirituality. Dull brown and blue show selfish religious feeling. Dull yellow, low type intellect. Apricot shows pride. Brick red indicates selfish affection and avarice. Light and bright red show pure affection. Grayish green with reddish tinge shows deceit. The health aura is clearly visible to the clairvoyant as a mass of faintly luminous violet-grey mist, interpenetrating the denser part of the human body and extending very slightly beyond. It is easy to understand how almost infinite may be the combinations and modifications of all these hues, so that the most delicate graduation of character, or the most evanescent of mingled feelings, may be expressed with the greatest accuracy. Many of the colours are unknown to our physical faculties, so that it is impossible to picture them with psychic hues. When a clairvoyant sees these colours in the aura or surroundings of an individual, therefore, he may feel that the characteristica indicated are present, and the same thing is true when they are to be seen in the surroundings of a returning spirit. The 7 auras surrounding man. When the advanced student carefully studies the human aura, he will find that there are a number of straight, white, very fine lines emanating from the body, and particularly the head, which resemble rays of white light. These are magnetic rays, which do not deal directly with the psychical condition of the subject. The innermost aura will be found to consist of 5 different coloured bands. The first will be pure white, the second light blue, the third darker blue, the fourth lemon yellow, the fifth dark red. The second layer of the aura will be found to be bluish violet merging into rose. Those two interpenetrate one another, forming very beautiful combinations. The third layer consists of 3 cloudy zones, the first pink, the second violet, and the third orange. The fourth layer consists of green cloud-like waves tinged with yellow, resembling the golden edges of clouds behind which the sun is shining. The fifth will be seen to be slate or indigo in color with silver edges. The sixth will consist of a beautiful light blue, with a whitish golden fringe. The seventh or outermost aura will be seen to be a grayish mist of a light violet tint. The outer aura completes the auric emanation of man, and is the outer shell, as it were, consisting of the so-called auric egg surrounding every human being, of which more will be said later. Changes in the colours. When a golden yellow light is seen about the head, it may be assumed that such an individual has great intellectuality combined with spirituality, and in some cases it has been said that this contains a cloud of gold dusk, each speck revolving spirally on itself. These colours of various auras are not unchanging, as before said, so that the student must not expect to see them exactly as described. They are greatly modified by the mental and psychical condition of the subject, and the thoughts and emotions which the latter may be experiencing at the time of observation will also affect the aura. The colours of thoughts. Thus fear gives rise to circles of bright rings, spread out in the form of a cone, of varying shades of grey, pink, and purple. A beautiful devotional thought may be expressed in the form of a star of bluish mist tinged with yellow. Pity may be seen as a reddish-violet cloud, from which issue pointed cones of a brighter pink. Deception will give rise to a steel-blue mist, tinged with pink and taking the shape of any regular spiral. Fear may give rise to balls of grey, pink, and yellow mist, while fear combined with anger will give forth a blackish-grey mist, from which red electrical flashes appear to issue. The auric egg. These colours extend over the whole of the auric egg, and may be seen by the clairvoyant to be influencing it throughout. The auric egg, which is formed round an individual by the atmosphere or aura emanating from him, extends both above and below his body, as well as sideways, and is from 9 to 10 feet in height, and 5 feet in diameter. If the colour of this auric egg be examined by a clairvoyant, characteristics of the individual may be clearly defined after the necessary practice and development, and the general character of the subject may be in this way discovered and interpreted. The colours of various individuals. Of course, it is necessary to make a long study of the aura and to attain a good deal of psychic development before all the details contained in this chapter can be discovered by the student in actual practice. Assuming, however, that you have progressed sufficiently in your studies to be enabled to see the aura of any individual, you may proceed to examine the whole auric egg with its varied colours. If you do this, you will find them to be about as follows. A highly developed individual will have a haze of golden light, issuing from the head and extending almost to the top of the egg. Above this will be a faint purplish light. On either side of this golden aura, and issuing upwards and outwards from the shoulders, will be a bluish light which merges into pink as it descends to the breast. From that point to the thighs a pinkish light may be seen, light in some cases, darkish red in others. About the knees this pink shades off into a delicate green, and this green covers the feet and extends downward almost to the lower margin of the auric egg, where it becomes a darkish blue. With less highly developed individuals these colours will vary according to the table given above. In some cases the auric egg will be composed almost entirely of greys, greens, and browns. Primary colours and their meanings. In general, it may be said that yellow and any bright clear colours, when seen in the aura of an individual, denote strong vitality and active intellectuality. Lilac, blue, and violet have to do with spiritual characteristics. They are associated with simple, unselfish natures, and with those having spiritual aspirations. Red is directly connected with passions, and particularly anger. Blue is associated with religious feeling, though if too muddy it denotes selfishness. The brighter and clearer the colours the better, and they should be as clear-cut as possible. Colours shown by spirits or seen clairvoyantly. These colours are not always associated with the human aura or with any human form. They are often seen by psychics who are developing themselves as cloud-like masses or shapes, which form more or less distinctly in front of them, and appear to take the outline of flowers, flashes, etc. Colours are occasionally seen in dreams, but the dream images of most people are colourless, or only light gray, like a shadow. They are in fact such stuff as dreams are made of. In general, these colors may be interpreted according to the laws given above, but the precise interpretation of these symbolic messages is a more difficult question to settle. A spirit who may be trying to communicate and to give a certain message to a medium may apply this same method of color symbolism to convey his meaning, but this is often confusing to the psychic and difficult to interpret. We shall come to this question, however, in the next chapter, which is devoted to symbolism. End of chapter 11.
Chapter 12 of Your Psychic Powers and How to Develop Them. Chapter 12. Symbolism. Symbolism is one of the most important and, at the same time, one of the least understood subjects in the whole realm of psychics and spiritualism. A proper understanding of what it means, and the adequate interpretation of symbols as presented to the psychic, would prove of great value to every student, and to all those who are undertaking their own psychic development. What symbolism means. First of all, it is necessary that you should understand exactly what symbolism means. A symbol is a sign for something else, which it expresses in a more or less partial and incomplete manner. Usually, a symbol is a sign which appeals to one of the five senses, but denotes not a sensual thing, but the thought lying behind it. Thus, the printed word on the page is the symbol of the author's thought, expressed in that word. The poem is the expression of the poet's mind and spirit, as set forth in the words and meter of the poem, etc. Thus, symbols are always only partial and incomplete, and represent but a small fraction of the thing they stand for, and we should always be in error if we tried to reconstruct the whole of the thing symbolized from what we perceive by means of our senses. Before we proceed to the subject of symbolism as studied in psychics and the phenomena of spiritualism, one other point should be explained. We never see an object in the physical world as it really is. Symbolized objects. We only perceive or realize through our five senses various aspects or qualities of the object. Thus, if you are looking at an orange, your sense of sight gives you the impression of a reddish-yellow sphere, rather irregular on its surface. Your sense of touch tells you that this thing is round, that it is somewhat rough and cool. Your sense of smell supplies you with the information that it has a pleasant odor unlike anything else, which is confirmed by your taste. In this particular instance, the sense of hearing does not enter into the question, as it would in many other instances. Now, all these things which appeal to our senses, color, odor, texture, etc., are qualities of the orange and not the orange itself. The orange is always something different from all of these, above and beyond them, and is more inclusive than any of these qualities and symbols. Thus, suppose you took away one of those symbols, its color. The orange would immediately become invisible to you, yet it would continue to exist, though we could never know of its existence. This shows us clearly that symbols are very inadequate and imperfect representations of a vaster something lying behind them, and they represent only a small fraction of the totality of the thing as it really exists. Symbolism of spirit. As applied to the spirit of man, we must begin by admitting the rather startling fact that no man has ever seen it. No man has ever seen another. All he has ever seen are the outward features, the form, the facial expressions of the other. And when our spirits hold communication with one another in this world, they do so by written symbols, by motions of the hands or head, or by means of air waves passing from the throat of one to the ear of the other. All but expressions or symbols, which are interpreted by us according to a certain prearranged code. If we did not have this prearranged code, it would be impossible for two intelligent beings to converse with one another, as may readily be seen when a Chinaman and an American meet for the first time, neither of them speaking the language of the other. They try as best they can to make each other understand what they are thinking about, what thoughts are in their minds, but they succeed very imperfectly, or not at all. The symbols employed are too inadequate to express their thoughts. Symbolism in spirit communication. Now, all these difficulties we encounter when a spirit endeavors to communicate with us through a medium or directly. It can express itself, as a rule, only very imperfectly, as will be explained in a later chapter, and must resort largely to symbols to convey its meaning. Hence, we should be very mistaken if we were to interpret this symbolism literally, or to assume that it represented the whole of the subject matter which the spirit desired to convey. As I said in my book, The Problems of Psychical Research, our dreams, as we know, are largely symbolic, the work of Freud and others having proved this beyond all doubt. It is highly probable that the ravings of delirium are also of this nature, though no one, so far as I know, has yet devoted to their study the attention they deserve. Certainly it is true in mediumistic phenomena, for in trance conditions a large number of the messages, tests, and visions seen are of this nature and character, the symbolism being often so elaborate that the original thought is not perceived. Why this symbolism? The probable answer to this question is that the message cannot be given directly, and that this symbolic method of presentation must be resorted to in order to get the message through at all. There is good evidence to show that a pictorial method is resorted to very largely by the spirits, mediums seeing what they describe very often when the more direct auditory method is not resorted to. The spirit presents somehow to the mind of the medium a picture, which is described and often interpreted by the medium. Often this interpretation is quite erroneous, resembling a defective analysis of a dream. Because of this, the message is not recognized, yet the source of the message may have been perfectly veridical, truth-telling. Let me illustrate this more fully. Suppose you desire to tell a Chinaman who speaks not a word of English to fetch a certain object from the next room. It would be useless for you to say the word watch because he would not know what the word meant. Probably you would tap your waistcoat pocket, pretend to take out a watch, wind it, look at the hands, etc., in your endeavor to convey to him your meaning. If this were not recognized for any reason, you would have the utmost difficulty in conveying your meaning to him, and equal difficulty in telling him to fetch the watch from the next room. Now, supposing these antics, or somewhat similar ones, were resorted to by a spirit in his attempt to convey the word watch, perhaps to remind the sitter of a particular watch he used to wear. The spirit might well proceed as follows. He taps his stomach and looks at a spot over his left side. He seems to wish to convey the impression that he has suffered much from bowel trouble, perhaps a cancer on the left side. Yes, he seems to be taking something away from his body. Evidently they removed some growth, and he wishes to convey the idea that something was taken from him. Now he is examining his hand. He is looking intently. Now he is doing something with his fingers. I can't see what it is, a little movement. Was he connected with machinery in life? Now he is pointing to the door, etc. The interpretation of symbols. Such an interpretation of the facts, it will be observed, while describing his actions, is wholly misleading as to its interpretation. The symbolism has been wholly misconstrued, and inasmuch as the subject probably never died of cancer, had no bowel trouble, underwent no operation, and was never connected with machinery, it is highly probable that the message would be put down wholly to the medium's subconscious imagination, or even to guessing or conscious fraud. Yet, it will be observed, the message was in its inception wholly veridical, the fault lying in the symbolism misinterpreted by the medium. There is evidence to show that other forms of symbolism are adopted also, applying to the auditory as well as to the visual presentation of images. It is well known that names are very difficult to obtain by mediums, and this is probably due to the fact that names are not pictures or visual symbols, and in themselves mean nothing as a rule. They are merely a combination of letters having a certain sound. The forms of symbolism. It is generally easier for the spirit to impress a partially developed psychic by means of a picture than in any other way, and for this reason names are difficult to get. Still, in many cases names are obtained by a picture shown. Thus, the name Merrifield was in one case given to the psychic as a picture of a number of children happily playing in a green field. Among other forms of symbolism are the following. A large key may be shown to the psychic. This may not mean a key at all, but a symbol of success, the key being the means by which the door of prosperity is opened. Colors are frequently shown, and nearly all colors are symbolic of something or other and have their definite meaning, as we saw in the last chapter. Strange, weird, and horrible figures do not necessarily mean anything bad or anything evil. They may be symbolic of something entirely different, and this is frequently seen in dreams, which are composed almost entirely of symbols throughout. Most psychics, when they are developing, see peculiar specks, clouds, and forms shaping themselves before them in space. They are naturally at a loss to interpret and explain these images. While there is much latitude of interpretation, always in symbolism the following simple suggestions based on traditional teachings may be found helpful. Clouds and lights. Clouds, if white, may be interpreted as signifying happiness and prosperity, either to the psychic or to one near and dear to them. If these seem to recede rapidly and fade away in the distance, a journey is often indicated. If the clouds appear to be advancing toward you, it indicates that news will shortly reach you. Good if the clouds are white, bad if they are dark. If red and lurid, ill fortune is upon your horizon, for which you must be on constant guard. Black clouds symbolize troubles of the heart. Tiny moving speeds of light, if they truly result from psychic development, are said to introduce that you are progressing favorably in your psychic sensitiveness. If these specks are dark, however, evil or harmful influences may be about you, for which you must be on a constant lookout. A light within a light is said to symbolize the presence of some spirit, desirous of communicating. Should such a sign appear to you, try at once to enter into communication with the spirit intelligence by asking questions, and note whether the light you see endeavors to reply to you by means of some simple code. Reptiles and other unpleasant signs usually symbolize the hidden fears of the psychic. They are symbolized in this way, externalizing the subconscious fear thought of the subject. Root out your hidden fear and apprehension, assert your mastery and fearlessness, and the unpleasant sign will always disappear. The subconscious and symbols. The subconscious mind has the faculty of describing in symbolic form thoughts, impressions, or influences which come to it, either through the senses or more directly by telepathic or clairvoyant visions or messages which are said to be given through it by the spirits. The spirit may convey a certain message to the subconscious mind of the psychic, and the message may be externalized or presented to the ordinary conscious mind in symbolic form, representing, apparently, something entirely different from the original message. It is in the interpretation of these symbols that much of the true art of mediumship and psychic development will be found to lie. The better the medium, the more expert in the interpretation of these symbols. At present, no general rule can be laid down as to the interpretation of the symbols employed, since these will differ very largely in every case, each medium having his own method of interpretation and his own form of symbolism. You must learn for yourself, by repeated experience, what the various symbols mean to you, and thus form a code or method of interpretation, which you can always follow throughout your future development. A close study of symbolism will yield you very important practical results, as well as being of great interest in itself. End of Chapter 12.
Chapter 13 of Your Psychic Powers and How to Develop Them. Recording by Michael Packard of Western Colorado. Chapter 13. Telepathy. Telepathy, mind reading, thought transference, are all terms meaning very much the same thing, namely, the ability to impress the mind of another person with a definite thought or thoughts, without traveling through the usual avenues of sense. The word telepathy was coined by Mr. F. W. H. Myers in 1882, and is derived from two Greek words, tele, at a distance, and pathos, feeling, and means literally sensing at a distance. From this it has come to mean thought reading, in general, as we now understand it. How telepathy operates. How telepathy takes place we cannot yet say with certainty. Some scientific men, such as Sir William Crookes, are inclined to believe that vibrations in the ether travel from brain to brain, very much like the messages in wireless telegraphy. Others, on the contrary, contend that this explanation is insufficient, and that we have no proof that such brain waves exist. As Mr. Myers expressed it, life has the power of manifesting itself to life, and this is as far as we can go as yet by way of scientific explanation of the facts. It is almost certainly true that telepathy takes place not between the conscious minds of two individuals, but by way of the subconscious, that vast field which we described in Chapter 4, the subconscious. So that if a message is sent from one conscious mind to another, it would travel in rather a roundabout fashion as follows. From the conscious to the subconscious mind of A, from that to the subconscious mind of B, and from the subconscious mind to the conscious mind of B. In B, the process by which it was conveyed from the subconscious to the ordinary mind would be that of externalization, so frequently seen in dreams, crystal gazing, and other phenomena. This fully explains to us why it is that we frequently receive telepathic messages at the moment we are falling to sleep, or at least appear to do so. We may have received the message an hour or two before this, but its externalization was impossible until the ordinary consciousness ceased to be so active with the affairs of the day, and then the subconscious mind had a chance to deliver its message, received some time before from some distant mind. The various kinds of telepathic messages. Telepathic messages may be visual, in which case they take the form of pictures, figures, written or printed words, etc. They may be auditory, in which case they take the form of spoken words. They may be emotional, in which case the subject may feel a particular depression or excitement. They may be volitional, in which case the subject is seized with the imperative desire to perform a certain action, etc. Telepathic messages may originate either in the living or in the dead. As they are transmitted from the subconscious mind, perhaps under the supervision and direction of the conscious mind, they are often transmitted most effectually during sleep, trance, under the influence of some drug, in delirium, at the moment of death, etc. These messages are most easily received at such times when the conscious mind is asleep or in abeyance, and for this reason we have so-called visions of the dying, ecstasy, trance-speaking, and revelation, etc. Telepathy from spirits. It is probably true that spirits converse with one another directly by means of telepathy, though they understand fully the thought of the other as though the sentence had been fully spoken. Swedenborg tells us that this is the case, and that the telepathic thoughts sent out by a spirit appear to other spirits or to mediums in trance as clear and sonorous as spoken words. If spirits in the flesh can converse at times with one another by means of telepathy, and if disembodied spirits converse with one another by this means, it is only natural to suppose that this is frequently the method of communication resorted to between embodied and disembodied spirits, and all trance mediums know that this is in fact the case. The larger meanings and applications of telepathy will be discussed more fully in the chapter devoted to prayer, etc. Practical experiments in telepathy. The following practical exercises will enable you to prove to your own satisfaction that telepathy exists, and that it can be reduced to a more or less simple process by continued practice. Select a friend with whom you are in sympathy, physically, mentally, and morally. One of you must be the sender or transmitter, the other the receiver or recipient. Let us suppose for a moment that you are the transmitter. The recipient should be seated in a comfortable chair at one end of a fairly large room, which must be freely ventilated. It is best that, at least during the early experiments, he should be blindfolded, or that he close his eyes or sit with his back to you, pencil in hand and pad on knee. He should sit in a semi-darkened part of the room. For your part, you should sit at a table, facing him, that is his back, with a pad of paper and pencil before you. Have a bright light thrown on the pad of paper, leaving the rest of the room in semi-darkness. Now draw upon the paper a symbol, perhaps a geometric figure, such as a triangle, circle, square, etc. Look at this figure intently, and endeavor to impress it on the recipient. You should not make each trial exceed 1 minute in length. How to ensure success? The attitude of mind which you hold during these experiments is very important. You should will that your recipient should see the picture presented to him, yet you should not strain yourself in the attempt, and wrinkling your brows, tensing the muscles, etc. will not add to the certainty with which your picture is conveyed, rather the reverse. On the other hand, you should have complete confidence in the fact that he will get the impression you are sending him. Never allow yourself for a moment to believe that you will fail. Say to yourself that he has already succeeded in receiving it. Do not allow yourself to become flustered or worried or anxious. Imagine your thoughts traveling to him in a definite form, either in the shape of the object itself or in the word, square, circle, etc., though in that case you must be careful that you do not unconsciously whisper the word so that he hears it. The recipient, on his part, should make his mind as blank as possible, and note down any pictures or impressions that come to him, no matter how wild they may appear. Above all, you must not be discouraged by early non-successes, for these you must expect. More complicated experiments. After you have succeeded with the diagrams, you may try more complicated pictures, such as playing cards, which are very good for this purpose, as the deck may be shuffled between each draw, and it is easy to calculate the percentage of guesses, since chance would always be 51 to 1 against the subject hitting upon the correct card by accident. After these experiments, you may try some in the transference of pain. Prick yourself lightly in various parts of the body with a sharp needle, or pinch yourself and see whether the subject can locate the pain correctly on himself. If he is a good subject, he will do so in very many instances, as though the pain were transferred directly to him and you were pricking or pinching him. Next, you may try a number of experiments in smell and taste. Procure a number of substances, such as cloves, nutmeg, pepper, sugar, etc., and smell or taste these in turn, being careful that you are far enough removed from your subject to prevent him from smelling these in the usual way. Many good subjects can tell immediately the substance you are putting into your mouth the instant you placed it there. After you have succeeded this far, you should try to increase the distance between you until you can perform the same feats though miles apart. How to prevent evil influences from affecting you. These simple experiments will prove to you and to the skeptic the existence of telepathy. They will render you more sensitive to the reception of messages from distant living minds, and also messages from the discarnate. In this way you will cultivate your sensitiveness to messages of this character, and this will be beneficial to you, provided that you do not carry these practices too far, and cultivate your sensitiveness unduly in wrong directions. Under normal, healthy conditions, your mind will not be affected by impressions of this character, since it will be most difficult for you to receive them, as a rule, no matter how hard you may try. The mind always protects itself against too easy access by outside minds. It is very rare indeed that subjects are impressed against their will. Some persons, it is true, believe that others at a distance are influencing them in this manner, and impressing them to do certain things. Many believe that they are hypnotized, etc. But in nearly all cases, these beliefs are illusory. They have no foundation in fact. When examined, they are found to rest wholly in the imagination of the subject, and they are frequently but the indications of an unbalanced mind. This does not mean that such persons are necessarily insane, but they would become so were they to dwell upon their imagined grievance long enough, and believe in it after they have been shown repeatedly that such was not the true case. It is this persistent will to believe in a thing which is not true that is one of the causes of insanity. The student who practices telepathy within reason, and who has followed the instructions contained in the early chapters of this book as regards fortifying and protecting his own inner nature, need have no fear that telepathic influences or impressions from others will ever affect him against his own will. In nearly all cases, these so-called influences are imaginary. And even should they exist, the subject, who has mustered himself and who has strengthened his soul from within, is capable of overcoming and repulsing any outside forces of this character, and of preventing any telepathic influence ever reaching him, no matter whether it comes from the living or from the dead. End of Chapter 13. Recording by Michael Packard of Western Colorado.
Chapter 14 of Your Psychic Powers and How to Develop Them. Recording by Jeannie Hall. Chapter 14. Clairvoyance. Clairvoyance is derived from two French words and means literally clear seeing. It means far more, however, in the language of spiritualism and psychics, and is now used to cover and classify, if not to explain, a large number of different phenomena, which someday will probably be explained in other ways. There are various types and kinds of clairvoyance, different authorities having given somewhat different definitions of the various subdivisions. Thus, the Manual of the National Spiritualists Association subdivides and defines the various types of clairvoyance as follows. Subjective clairvoyance. 1. Subjective clairvoyance is that psychic condition of a human being, who thereby becomes a medium, which enables spirit intelligences, through the manipulation of the nerve centers of sight, to impress or photograph upon the brain of the medium pictures and images which are seen as visions by the medium without the aid of the physical eye. These pictures and images may be of things, spiritual or material, past or present, remote or near, hidden or uncovered, or they may have their existence simply in the conception or imagination of the medium communicating them. Objective clairvoyance. 2. Objective clairvoyance is that psychic power or function of seeing objectively spiritual beings, objects, and things by and through the spiritual sensorium which pervades the physical mechanism of vision, without which objective clairvoyance would be impossible. But few persons are born with this power. In some it is developed, and in others it has but a casual quickening. Its extent is governed by the rate of vibration under which it operates. Thus, one clairvoyant may see objectively spiritual things which to another may be invisible, because of the degree of difference in the intensity of the power. X-ray clairvoyance. 3. X-ray clairvoyance is a form of clairvoyance which partakes of the characteristics of the X-ray and seems to be objective. The clairvoyant who possesses this power is able to see physical objects through intervening physical matter, can perceive the internal parts of the human body, diagnose disease, and observe the operations of healing and decay. Cataleptic clairvoyance. 4. Cataleptic clairvoyance occurs when the body is in a trance state resembling sleep, induced by hypnotic power, exercised by an incarnate or decarnate spirit, or it may be self-induced. When in this state the spirit leaves the body and is able, at its own will or the suggestion of the hypnotist, to travel to remote places and to see clearly what is transpiring in the places it visits, and to observe spiritual as well as material things in its environment. While in this state, it sometimes happens that the thoughts of the spirit in its travels are expressed by the lips of the physical body, and that thought images are conveyed to it through the physical body. This is due to the fact that there is a spirit cord which connects the body and the spirit and transmits vibrations between them. As long as this cord is not severed, the spirit can return to the body, but should it be severed, then what we call death would at once ensue. Under this form of clairvoyance, there is an interblending of subjective and objective spiritual sight. Trance-control clairvoyance. 5. Trance-control clairvoyance is that psychic state under which the control of the physical body of the medium is assumed by a spirit intelligence, and the consciousness of the medium is, for the time being, dethroned. In this case, the controlling spirit is really the clairvoyant, and simply uses the medium's body as a means of communicating what the spirit sees, and therefore the question of subjective and objective spiritual sight, insofar as the medium is concerned, cannot be raised. To some persons who go to mediums for readings and who may become witnesses in trials at law, it may not be known that under trance control, the medium is to all intents and purposes absent. Therefore, in dealing with definitions of clairvoyance to be used for the enlightenment of thinking people, judges, and juries, it seems necessary for the protection of such mediums to explain what is here termed trance control clairvoyance. Telepathic clairvoyance, etc. 6. Telepathic clairvoyance is the subjective perception in picture form of thought transmitted from a distance. The type of clairvoyance illustrated in Class 4 is frequently called traveling clairvoyance, because the spirit appears to travel, after leaving its body, and visit distant scenes. According to the above definitions, this type of clairvoyance is classified under definition number 1, but other authorities would give it a separate class by itself. When the psychic's mind seems to travel backward along the stream of time and remembers events which were beyond its normal recollection, we have cases of so-called retrocognition. When, on the other hand, the psychic's mind seems to travel forward into the future and sees scenes and events which, of course, he was otherwise unable to foretell, we have cases of prevision, prophecy, and precognition.